Today's event is actually intended to celebrate the intersection of those key areas and showcase the opportunities that we all have to collaborate, to innovate, and to think a little differently about our public sector workforce. We have leaders from cities and counties and special districts, as well as those that are adjacent to our local agencies. Our panel discussions are going to actually bring some really applicable examples of great work that's being done from across the state with some regional spotlights as well. It's going to be a really, really great afternoon, but it's going to be a really, really busy afternoon, and we're so glad that you have chosen to join us. Now, before we dive into our program, I'd love to talk through some virtual housekeeping for the day. Many of us are very, very familiar with these platforms by now, but we'd like to provide a refresher in case you're kind of moving into more in-person activities of late. So this is a summit that will be moderated by an incredible team of local government and workforce experts. I'm grateful to be joined by this summit team, Rafael Aguilera, Paul De La Cerda, Jeff Marizik, and Melissa Keene. We're going to alternate throughout this summit, and you'll be hearing from each of us at various times throughout the day. And as you may have noticed, all of you as summit participants will be on your mute for the whole duration of the event. But there are going to be some opportunities for questions throughout. Any questions you have can be typed into the Q&A box that you should see at the very bottom of your screen. You can do that at any time during the discussion. The chat function actually will not be public, but you can chat the organizers privately if you need to. If you have any technology challenges or issues, there is a specific tech questions person that you can specifically chat if you need to do that. And yes, a recording of this summit will be available to send to all registrants a few days after this event. Next slide shows our ambitious agenda for the day. After these opening remarks, we're going to dive into a conversation with the Community College Chancellor's Office. And then we'll kind of work our way through 4 different panel discussions, ranging in topics from inclusive apprenticeship strategies, to equity, to systems change, to recruitment and retention, and partnering with higher education. We will end with a legislative update that frames what policies and legislations may be on the horizons that are going to impact all of our work. This is a jam-packed agenda, as I said, and we're going to go straight through this virtual summit. We'll have a few virtual breaks and some audience engagement sprinkled throughout. We'll also try to answer as many questions as possible through the day and at the end of every kind of section. But if we don't get to them today, we will definitely follow up in some way. We have a few structured transitions, but we encourage you, if you need to, please go ahead and step away, multitask as you need to, just make sure to come back. The other thing I'll flag is that in the chat, we have just dropped in a link to the program that was sent to everyone already via email if you've already registered. And we'll make sure to drop that in throughout the summit in case you don't see it when you first log in. All right, so let's move on with the program. So next slide shows that, by virtue of you being here, it's pretty likely that you have a decent chance or you have maybe heard of ILG or know something about us. But in case you don't, you should know that ILG is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is really focused on local government. We're connected to 3 amazing affiliate or associations, the League of California Cities, CSAC, and CSDA, that they collectively help us serve over 2,500 local agencies. They focus a lot on the advocacy elements that are connected to local government, and ILG focuses exclusively on what happens after the policy is decided. We offer the practical, the easy-to-use resources that local agencies need for the day-to-day work of running their agencies. The next slide talks about how we focus our work and what areas we focus on. Leadership and governance, workforce development, civics engagement, public engagement, sustainability. There's a lot of things in those buckets that really connect to what local government deals with all the time. And ILG offers a range of services like convenings like this one, plus additional training and education, deep technical assistance, capacity building. We basically work to help cities, counties, and special districts do a little bit more to navigate the complexity of their role. But at the end of the day, it's really about building trust with our communities, building trust with our employees, building trust with our partners, and with all of those who interact with local government. The next slide shows that today's slide really highlights how, we really are under the category of convening, right? And with a little bit of training sprinkled throughout, this is an example of one of the things that ILG does. We are in partnership with the Innovative Pathways to Public Service and that collaborative. And it's made possible thanks to funding from the High Road Training Partnership Grant and a Workforce Accelerator Fund grant as well. The next slide show our amazing program partners and our sponsors on the slide after this. So now let's learn a little bit more about you. So we'd like to make sure that we know who is in the room, and we'd love to make sure that you flag in here a little bit more about how you are coming to this session, why you're coming to this session, and make sure we can tailor some of the conversation around maybe what you're looking for. So we are going to ask Melissa to jump on the screen, and she's going to give you a little bit of the instructions related to this Mentimeter polling exercise.
Perfect. Thanks, Erica. So you see on the screen the instructions to follow to connect to our Mentimeter poll. So you can do this on your smartphone, or you can do it on another browser tab on your computer, whatever is easiest for you. But either go to menti.com or you can click on that QR code, and then you'll be asked to enter a participant code, which you also see on the screen. So as you all are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and toggle over to the Mentimeter, where you will continue to see the instructions. Hopefully you all can see that now.
We do, thank you.
So as you're connecting, give us a thumbs up so we can track how many folks are connected. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please chat us the tech questions chat that you see in the options in your chat, and we can help you connect if you're having trouble. But we'll give this just a couple seconds. Looks like people are having success.
And as I mentioned, we're going to co-facilitate this summit. So you might see Melissa on the screen, you might see our colleagues, Rafa, you might see other colleagues on the screen. We're gonna go tag team a little bit, and it's a fantastic thing for us to connect some dots with a little bit of virtual engagement, since we can't see you all as well. And Melissa, just give us a flag when we are ready to roll.
Looks like we've got quite a few folks connected.
I see somebody said Nope, go for it.
No, I think I've seen a couple chats come through, so hopefully folks are getting help if they need it.
Yeah, you should see something that says waiting for presenter. We're just waiting to get the full group on, or as many of you can on, and then we'll start the poll.
In the interest of time, I'm going to launch our first question, which is not completely related. It's to get you used to the software. As I do that, you will continue to see the code at the top of your screen. So that won't go away if you're still trying to connect. Please do. But I will go ahead and kick us into this question, and I think turn it over to Erica to facilitate the next couple questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. All right, this is a hardball question. We'll see if you can do it. How many cups of coffee have you had today? I am not participating in the poll. I've only had 1 cup of coffee today. I may have a couple more before the day is done. And there's a lot on this line that don't drink coffee. I'm beginning to think we should also add, because it's growing in popularity, mushroom coffee, which I know a lot of people are transitioning to, and tea. So tea from Crystal. Yes, we see that is very popular. Lots of non-caffeinated or alternate caffeine options. We will start to modify this in the future. Looks like we've got everybody technically on this poll, so it seems like it's working. 35% of you have had 1 cup. Good for you. Not too crazy. 2 servings for 26% of you, and 4% of you are at 3 or more. We will not cast judgment. And then some of you don't drink coffee at all. All right, let's go to the next question. This is to give us a sense of who's in the room, what kind of organization you might represent. We've got panelists from all different categories and all different backgrounds. So we welcome all different categories of attendee. Obviously, we're focused on local government, but we know that this ecosystem is broad and very, very important. And so we want to connect some dots with the work that you're doing and the work that you're interested in hearing more about. Fantastic. Looks like we have a high concentration of cities, followed by counties, closely followed by the other. And then we've got special districts, nonprofits, state agencies, and education. So fantastic, fantastic. What if you're, what's other could be anything that's not listed below. So sometimes there's consultants in that group. If you just don't see your bucket listed there, workforce boards, technically, a lot of them fall under kind of a county category, but you could put yourself in other if you wanted to. We're really flexible in the other bucket. Self-select yourself, and then we'll make some sense of it. But it's just helpful to know kind of percentage-wise. Fantastic. Next, looks like we're pretty close. Next question. Does your organization experience workforce challenges? And that could be in internal challenges, it could be recruitment retention challenges, it could be any number of things, right? That we make some assumptions based on the data that we're seeing in the labor market of some pretty significant issues, certainly in the public sector. But it's also transitioning into the private sector, and the private sector, I think, is experiencing a lot of the same things. So this isn't intended to be exclusive, just intended to provide a snapshot for a pretty big subset of our target market, really addressing public sector challenges. And I think it's a resounding yes here in terms of percentages, as you can see, vast majority are saying yes, yes, yes. And that's really the area that we're focusing on, is not just to highlight the negativity and the challenges, but also to transition that to solutions and opportunities. So you've said that you might face some. For those of you that do know, there are a few that didn't. But what is the biggest workforce challenge your organization faces? If you can type those in through your cell phones, please do that. Go ahead and type in, what is the biggest workforce challenge your organization faces? And there's going to be some clear ones. We probably should have done a word cloud here. We'll see if we can make that happen. Retention, retention, retention. I'm seeing some themes there. Hiring staff. Lots of other ones in here: filling vacancies, retention, upward mobility, succession planning. Yes. Resistance to IDEA. Definitely. That's something that we're going to talk through, right? A little bit. How do we change a system? How do we change hearts and minds, right? Work morale and heavy workloads. Definitely. There's a lot of capacity issues in local government, the public sector. How do we address the fact that we have to do more with less, or with what we have in the current world, current staffing, current budget environment? Those are all real problems, real issues. Filling vacancies, being agile, right? In job descriptions, it's a very static kind of industry, right? We're a super sector, but we might be set in our ways in this job classification realm. It's kind of hard to change some of the civil service rules, right? There are some challenges there. Posting and having entry-level jobs. Training, this is good. Yeah, reflecting our community. This goes along with the IDEA concept of improving diversity, equity, and access. DEIB and compliance. Yeah, these are big ones, right? Very exciting to see. Attracting qualified applicants. So a lot of retention, which is interesting. It's not necessarily exclusively about bringing them in, it's about keeping them. So very, very important for us to know. Knowledge transfer when doing long-term staff, when long-term staff retire. And we're going to see that more with the silver tsunami, right? That has been, we've been talking about and have been going through for quite some time. Excellent. All right, next one. What occupations, if any, are hardest to fill in your organization? And this could tie in, for those of you that said retention, so many of you said retention. What are the ones that are hard for you to retain? You can use that as well. So fill or keep filled. Finance, engineers, superintendents, motor coach operators, planners, engineers, limited term positions. Senior level looks like deputy directors or higher level engineers, police officers. Yeah. So public safety. I see that a couple times. Engineering, law enforcement. Yep. Definitely some themes, and you can all see those. Fantastic. I think what this demonstrates, right, is that there's so much continuity across the line. So many people, I think, are feeling and experiencing the same things, seeing, I think, the same things. Health educators, lots of engineers, some public works, law enforcement, public safety. Attorneys, yeah, heard a couple of things on the attorney side, administrative staff. I mean, we've definitely run the gamut based on this list of many and many of the positions in local government. And definitely see that very unique management analyst job title that really does require specialized skills that we're seeing across numerous agency types. That does require something a little different than what maybe even the name suggests, right? Going from a victim to self-empowering citizen. That's an interesting one. Thank you for sharing that. Local voices. Yeah, there is an interesting desire to have, you know, lived experience with some of the positions that we're filling, especially in the mental and behavioral health and the health and human services realm, where you really want those that are engaging with the population to understand some of those issues on a personal level. And so that retention can be difficult too, that we're seeing and hearing across the space. Melissa, do we have another question? All right. I think this might be our last one. What is the biggest workforce opportunity for your organization in the next 5 years? Apprenticeships for youth, pending retirements, building a supportive culture, succession planning, advancement. These are all really good. Excellent funding, lots of succession planning, talent pipeline. Fantastic. Amazing. Yeah. Leadership development. See some apprenticeships in there. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Articulating the upside of public service, even just expressing the value of it, right? That is key. Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Melissa, I think that's all of our questions. Yes?
Yes, it is. I will toggle back to
Perfect. Let's
our
toggle back.
PowerPoints.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that information and really making sure that we have a sense, right, of who's in the room and also the kinds of things that you're going to be listening for, and maybe the kinds of information that you want us to not only follow up on this summit with, but also maybe embed into the conversation today if it's not already planned to be. So we'll definitely make sure that our moderators and that our panelists have that insight in mind. But let's get on to the summit itself. So local governments, as you are now seeing on the screen and as you've probably experienced, are in this sea change in recruitment and retention trends. And that's been over the past few years. And it's exacerbated by COVID, certainly, but it's certainly not exclusively because of it, right? It started way before, and we're just seeing sort of the impacts of that on top of the COVID impacts. So we've had surging retirements, and that's reflected in some of these comments about like knowledge transfer, right? And long-term people kind of leaving and then going into new people and new roles with very different experience. So we've had those surging retirements. We've had those, I think, precedented shifts in voluntary separations, right? And those trends, retention statistics, that's pretty clear based on even just what you've shared with us. I think we know that we are in a new era of public sector workforce, right? Employees are really expecting different things from the public sector and from the public sector as an employer. And I think that what has worked in the past will not work in the future. And I think you all kind of know that as well. But more than that, I think our world overall is changing, and that our industries and by extension, the public sector as a super sector is shifting as well. And we have to prepare for emerging technology and new regulation that really impacts the kind of skill sets we need from our team members. And because of civil service protections and maybe labor agreements and other sort of types of arrangements, we have incredibly unique skills and needs that we have to upskill, and we have to reskill staff that are current and not just rehire people, right? We need to rethink about what our current workforce looks like. But we also still demand, as we should, very, very high quality employees so we can continue to provide the best public services to our communities. And that's really the crux of our discussion today. So all of our speakers this afternoon are going to address how the partners in this workforce ecosystem, of which there are many, can really collaborate to achieve shared goals. And in local government, I think you all know, it is collaboration and partnership that is the best way to find community-driven solutions that are appreciated and that are trusted. And so this summit is really just the first of ILG's convenings on how we can apply this to the workforce development space. I'm excited to kick off our summit with a new partner to ILG in support of local governments. Anthony Cordova is with the Community College Chancellor's Office with the state of California. Tony's bio is included in the program that was sent to all registrants and also re-linked in the chat just now. Tony, welcome to the program.
So I'm glad to be here. Thank you. And before we get started, I just wanted to make one quick note. I'm super excited that I was able to witness and see all the comments and all the feedback that was presented earlier, because the apprenticeship, it just said bold, 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 apprenticeship, and a lot of that stuff. So I was super excited. And the fact that you said that there's going to be change, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how the dynamic is changing, specifically with the California community colleges as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's dive in and tell us about those things. So for those that may not know the role of the Community College Chancellor's Office, can you just tell us a little bit about it and your specific role in it? Because it's kind of special.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So for those of you that don't know, our chancellor, Dr. Sonia Christian, she oversees the California Community College system throughout the state of California. It's comprised of 116 community colleges, 115 traditional colleges, and then there's one called CalBrite. It's our fully online institution that provides a lot of the online options, modalities for our students. We currently serve over 2.1 million students. We are the largest educational system throughout the entire nation of the U.S. We have developed what we call our Vision 2030. It's the roadmap. It's our roadmap to how we're supporting our colleges. It's based upon three very simple primary goals. And those goals include equity and success, equity and access, and equity and support. We could go into a little bit more depth, but I really try to focus on the equity and support, because that's what it means for our students to be successful. Being able to identify the hurdles, the challenges, the barriers that our system puts into place, the barriers that employment puts into place, and being able to assist them throughout the entire journey of getting into that workforce and the goal. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, the shift in the focus and the mindset that we're doing. We are very strategic in the partnership development component of it. Not only the partnership with the local employers, but the partnership with the counties, the cities, the local agencies, the state departments, and really being strategic and developing a strong relationship to support each other as we go down this journey of supporting our workforce and the students get the skills that they need to be successful.
Amazing.
A little bit about myself. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
Talk
so,
about yourself.
yeah, a little bit about myself. I've tried to focus on not going into too much detail about myself. We'll be here forever. I don't think we got that type of time. But I come with a little bit of sense of practicality. I know what it takes to be engaged in the workforce. As I come from the private sector, I won't tell the number of years, but I think all the gray will end up giving me a little bit of a clue. But I came with the private sector into education to really help support the students, support the development opportunities for those that need it. And I really prided myself on being able to have that access and the accessibility and that servant mentality, that leadership aspect of it. At the same time, focusing on implementing and driving the student successes now throughout the career education. So that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. So the Chancellor's Office is relatively new to ILG, right? We've worked with individual community colleges for years, but we're now in a partnership with the California Community College Chancellor's Office. And with that comes this really unique lens into workforce and economic development. And so can you talk a little bit about how the CCCCO impacts workforce and economic development? Because there is an important linkage there, and I'd love for you to just give us a snapshot.
No, for sure. Thank you. And great question. Other than going into the details about, yeah, we oversee $1.4 billion in funding that it goes into various aisles or various areas, supporting the 116 community colleges. We support the K through 12s via the Strong Workforce Platform. We do a large amount into adult education. When you get a chance to take a look at the Vision 2030 document itself, you're going to see a very specific aspect of it that's pointing out the ninth through baccalaureate attainment, right? Really making sure that we have an intention of getting higher education attainment for all of our students and starting in the ninth grade. And there's an emphasis on the dual enrollment component of it and getting into baccalaureate programs that our community colleges offer as well. So it's the internal transfer of getting into the pathway and going into that higher education attainment, but also focusing on students that want to transfer into the four-year universities and get into their master's programs and doctoral programs as well, right? We ensure that these funds are spent effectively. One of my goals is trying to be more efficiently of these dollars and the funding that we're able to co-locate with. We drive the development of those partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, with the public and the private organizations. Supporting there's different realms of also supporting like the skill-based aspect of it, of getting more focused on what does it mean to be successful of your competencies and ensuring that you're able to be successful when you get into your role with your future career and what that means. And we do a lot of that with our non-traditional contract ed and or community educational programs, getting into the non-credit of focusing on what the skills mean, but then at the same time setting up the pathway that the students can have success whichever modality that they go in. If they wanted to go into the non-credit, at least the skills would now have a means to be able to articulate or be evaluated for equivalency for credit when the student now decides, okay, I want to get my bachelor's degree. They didn't waste their time through the years. It's always going to be something that's applicable for their higher education attainment goals.
Awesome. Thank you. So if, we talked a little bit about this in the intro that, we want to open access to the public sector, make it easier for people to get in, but we want to make sure that the people that we bring in are well trained, that they have the right skills, that they still have the quality assurance, right, that we need. And it's so important that we have training partners that can customize things for us, that can maybe bring alignment with their training and their education, existing or otherwise, with our specific needs. So as it relates to the public sector, when you think about cities, counties, special districts, and state agencies, what's the link between the community colleges that you kind of are overseeing and the funding that you're receiving for them and this public sector workforce? Is there a real close linkage that you're making, and maybe an example if you have them?
There is, and there's a great question again. One of the things that we talked about is I went and pulled some data and looked at really what that impact truly means to the public sector specifically. So in the 22-23 year, we had over 92,000 students that had taken a course or were in a program pathway that could lead to a local government job, a local opportunity. In that same year, nearly 33,000 students completed that program and got their award and degree, whether it be certificate or an associate degree. They're applying for jobs such as administration of justice, human services, public administration, education, a lot of your industrial technology programs, your advanced manufacturing, your automotive, your facilities, your facility management, those are just a high level lens. But if you think about it, every single one of these opportunities that we employ within the public sector, our students have a capability of getting into them. At the same time, we're really focusing on that credit for prior learning and taking those individuals that are currently employed in the workforce and awarding them the opportunity to get that higher education attainment for that advancement opportunity. We like I said, we utilize, the different means, the different modalities of contract education, really focusing on the non-credit for the upskilling of all the existing staff members. So if you have a partnership with your local community college, you could sit down and say, okay, hey, I have a specific skill that I need to be able to ramp up my employees. And maybe that skill will use it office technology, Microsoft Office skills. They need to be more efficient with their Excel database or Excel processing. We have tools and resources that could be very specific and short term and get them the necessary skills that they need to be successful within your realm of workforce itself. I think
Perfect.
one of the other things that I wanted to highlight here as well is, developing these statewide partnerships. And I'll use one as an example. The governor's office, the chancellor's office, and an organization called NVIDIA. We just entered into an exciting partnership. We signed an MOU with NVIDIA back in August, and it's really to help support the incorporation of AI and what the AI means to the workforce training programs and how we're going to be able to leverage that in the human aspect of it within everything that we do from education, but then also within the workforce as well. It includes resources that help us support the update of curriculum, making sure that the curriculum is aligned with the skills that we're having expectations of in our job descriptions, getting a lot of that stuff coordinated out. It'll help with labs. It'll help with the immersive technology, the simulation skills that are being developed into a lot of the different workforce areas that we have. And it'll also open up these new pathways as we're developing what these new jobs are going to look like. And that's what the future of work is going to mean for us within both local, public, and private sectors as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you. That AI program or collaboration sounds really interesting. And I know that some organizations are still figuring out, where and how to integrate AI. But I think what we know is that it is here. It is already happening, right? It's already embedded in our lives, whether we're comfortable with it or not. And just like, the sustainability and climate movement, these are things that are job skills we're going to have and have to need to understand how it's gonna play. Can you talk a little bit more about any other special programs, maybe that's funding or other initiatives that you might have that local governments should be aware of, that they could maybe pay attention to? And particularly in the funding realm, which will probably be of interest, a lot of your funding, you talked about billions of dollars, funnels straight to the community colleges themselves. Is there funding that goes outside of that? Directly to local agencies? Are there programs that they should be aware of, or how can they partner with the community colleges to package or partner in demonstration projects or otherwise?
Yeah, and that's a great question as well. So, and it goes back to the introduction and listening or seeing and reading all of the responses into the survey itself. I was super excited and super enthusiastic about this question coming up, specifically because it's around the apprenticeship modality. And the apprenticeship is one of the things that we know is going to help support not only the student through their advancement of their career or their education attainment goals, the support within the workforce itself, but it's also, it's one of those things it could be like a financial aid assistance as well. Students are now getting paid. It's that earn and learn modality to be able to get into not only the work experience, but also have the opportunity to put food on the table because they're now getting paid for their work. And as there's a very strong goal. It's very aggressive. The governor's office put out this goal of by the year 2029 that we're going to have in excess of 500,000 registered apprentice. Pretty lofty, but I think it's doable. I think it's very doable. I think it's if you develop the partnerships with the largest organizations out there, and that's your county, that's your city, right? We employ majority of every county that we reside in. We are probably the number one, if not the number one employer in that community itself. So let's be able to develop an opportunity, and that's those apprenticeships. So if you focus on the apprenticeship, whether it be youth apprenticeship, whether it be there's an Erica program out there that helps support females that are wanting to get into non-traditional programs. And then there's also funding what we call the CHI grant. It's the California Apprenticeship Innovative or Initiative that I can tell you right now, my last round of applications, we received over 112 applications. No, wait. over 210 applications and over $112 million in requests. So that's now leveraging me to be able to go back to the legislation and say, look we need more money. We need more funding to help support the apprenticeship development. And I encourage you as the employer, whether it be county, city, public, whatever realm it is in, to get with your local community colleges and identify an opportunity, because those funds can be awarded to the employer partner. It's a shared resource and opportunity to leverage the dollars that's really helping support the wages and the instructional component of it.
I love that.
I also want to highlight one of the things that we're looking at doing is really leveraging our regional consortia work that's happening throughout the state of California. There's 8 regions. Everybody falls within one of these regions. So if we're able to connect with those regions, they have a resource called the Center of Excellence. These COEs provide very relevant data and labor market information that will help support. If you as an organization see that there's a trend within your department, how's that trend going to shift and what needs are going to be available or required to be able to help continue the support of the sustainability or that succession planning and develop that component of it. And you make it very data driven with the labor market information, and you can really accelerate the outcomes of your programs and the sustainability on itself. One other fund that I really wanted to highlight is
Yeah.
strong workforce.
Okay.
Every college has a local and a regional allocation. I would encourage getting with your community colleges and see how the strong workforce funds can help support the collaborative developing the relationship with those local colleges.
Amazing. And one of the things too that I think is a really an underutilized resource if you don't have a partnership with your community college is they can be phenomenal recruitment engines for you. So when you're thinking about how do I find this next generation, how do I get some new people in that are well trained, and how can I partner? That's one great way. And maybe there are some programs you could even develop, whether it's an apprenticeship program or others that will really help you connect those dots, potentially with some funding. It sounds like that the college chancellor's office may have. We have some potential opportunities there if you're not already doing it. And one thing that we can do in our follow-up is make sure we send out links to Vision 2030. We'll make sure we send out links to some of those key funding initiatives that you've highlighted, Tony. And we'll make sure that anything else that's covered as it relates to things like the Center of Excellence, some of which we're going to talk about later in our Workforce Summit, we'll make sure that some of those key links are connected so that the attendees today know how to make those relationships happen if they aren't already. Any other tips for our team before we see if we can answer a question or two from the Q&A?
As I mentioned earlier when I started in the conversation about who I am, if you ever have any questions, my information is on the website. You could always go to the CCCCO, it's 4Cs10.edu. Search for the Workforce and Economic Development Division, or also known as WED. My information is there. My team's information is available. The contact information for our regional consortium chairs is accessible. It's all there for us, and we're here to help support that relationship and that partnership. And we're looking at being very strategic in developing that, and want to be able to make sure that everybody knows how to get that. And just reiterate, you got a local community college. We're called the community college because we are the college of the community. You are the city, you are the county of the community, and there's no reason for us not to be doing the same work that we all have the end goal, and that's supporting our workforce, that's supporting our future, right? And our students get to these high wage jobs and opportunities. So there should be no excuse and no reason why we don't have a great partnership and relationship with your California Community College, whether it be official or unofficial, right? It should be there. I also want to encourage every career educational program is required to have an advisory board. It's required to have this advisory committee that's comprised of individuals that have an immediate need within the specific subject matter, right? So I encourage everybody to engage with that advisory committee of that program, because that's where you're really going to be able to do a couple different things. You're going to be able to provide your relevant information that you need at your specific site, content, to make sure that the curriculum is aligning and the students are getting those learning outcomes that are very specific to your needs. At the same time, you can use that as your immediate recruiting tool, because now you're engaging and very active with the programs, and you're identifying who those students are. So you can use that as a recruitment opportunity to sit down and say, I want her. I want him to be able to come, and intern at my site or my location, or develop that apprenticeship program. And then you get immediate access to the students and fill in your workforce.
Thank you so much. We have a strong and official MOU with the Community College Chancellor's Office. ILG will be working really closely with them to talk more about the needs of the local government public sector and how we can kind of embed that across the local government ecosystem. Make sure those partnerships are able to be strong across all of the consortia and the individual colleges. And then we're also going to learn a little bit more about apprenticeships and otherwise. Two really quick questions. Number one, can you repeat the name of that committee that you mentioned, Anna, Tony, that people should consider joining from every one of their colleges?
I will, and I'm gonna type it in there right now.
Amazing, thank you. And then there was a question about Calbright, and I don't know if you could answer that about their process, but I know that sometimes it takes a little while for some of our community colleges to get the programs and the certificate programs up and running. Any insight on the Calbright program, and specifically community health workers, promotoras, any other things we can do, maybe specifically with that virtual Calbright option that's going to be statewide?
Yeah. So specifically not on Calbright apprenticeship programs, but because Calbright is more your introduction classes, right? We'll get it in that, and I won't go into all the details. But they do have a relationship with specific colleges. So they're developing a pre-apprenticeship opportunity that does take the student into like data analysts at specific colleges. There are a lot of activities that are specific around community healthcare workers, as well as new apprenticeship programs under the wellness coach. So there's wellness, and that's really based upon your mental and behavior health programs, with a little bit of psychology, a little bit of child development, a little bit of this, a little bit of your public safety, public health aspect of it. And it's really focusing on supporting the new job code that's been developed, and that's the wellness coach. Your community healthcare workers and the navigators, I believe, will lead also into that opportunity to get into that wellness aspect of it. I hope that helps. You could always go to it's HCI, it's your Healthcare Access and Information. It's governed under the Department of Human Health Services. And there's more content and information available through HCI.
HCAI. And then one other thing, a shameless plug, that ILG is working on an apprenticeship, public sector apprenticeships initiative. We're piloting it now, and we know that community health workers are a severe need, and we would love to connect with maybe Jose, if that's of interest to you. We would love to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to be piloting some high demand occupations across the state, and we've heard that that might be one of them. So more to come in our apprenticeships panel. Actually,
on that second question, Erica, real fast, just I don't know if I answered it appropriately in the chat, but it's if you connect with your career education department at your local community colleges, they'll have internship, but then also local advisory committees. So that's the key word. If you take a look at the local advisory committee within certain pathways, that's how you get connected.
Perfect. Well, I know that we're running out of time. Tony, thank you so much for your time today and for representing the community colleges across the state. Looking forward to working with you, and so excited about what we have to come for the public sector and our community college system.
Likewise, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what I love, our California community colleges.
And we could talk forever. Thank you, Tony. We do want to transition to our next panel. We do have questions. We're going to hang on to those, and we're going to see if we can answer them offline. And we will make sure that we touch base with you all in some way after the summit. But I do want to transition us to our next panel, and our next presenter is going to be a facilitator, is going to be Paul de la Cerda. He has worked really closely with ILG for the last 2 years. He's an expert in actually community colleges, but also workforce development in general. And Paul's going to moderate this panel on inclusive apprenticeships and some success stories from the public sector. Paul, it is yours to take away.
Great, thanks, Erica. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here and joining us on this important day to talk on this IDEA Summit. Building inclusive apprenticeships is our next topic here, and we're going to talk about success stories from the public sector. So let's dive right into it and let you know who you're going to meet. So today you're going to meet these distinguished panelists, and the first one that you're going to meet and engage with this morning, I'm going to start in the middle, is Vince Kohler. Mr. Kohler is a national expert on U.S. career education and workforce policy and a thought leader in adapting a European dual professional education system for the United States. He has led technical assistance initiatives for the U.S. Department of Labor, Education, Housing, and Urban Development. Currently, Vince is coaching several states in expanding their apprenticeship systems, assisting the Urban Institute in developing a national occupational framework for a new and existing apprenticeship pathway, and supporting the California Youth Apprenticeship Committee in developing a plan to introduce youth apprenticeship at scale in California. Good to have you, Vince. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Our next panelist is going to be Laura Thompson. Laura, in her role as a strategic business consultant, she works at the Division of Apprenticeship Standards here in California. Laura imbues a deep institutional knowledge about public sector apprenticeship. She currently maintains a sizable public sector portfolio and is instrumental in the development and scaling of non-traditional apprenticeships throughout California, including some of the nation's first of its kind programs. So welcome for joining us, Laura. Great to have you today. And lastly, we have Channing Hawkins, Esquire. Channing T. Hawkins, Esquire is an attorney, entrepreneur, and committed public servant. He specializes in providing general counsel services to corporations, government entities, and nonprofits. In addition, he has served as a trusted advisor to the California State Assembly, the U.S. Congress, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He's a founder of IE Works, a program dedicated to nurturing the next generation of leaders in the water industry through specialized training and development initiatives. Mr. Hawkins, thanks for joining us. All right. So a little bit about this panel, and we'll jump straight into some questions and do a little roundtable with our panelists. In this first panel, we're going to be discussing the role of apprenticeship in the public sector and how they can be leveraged to build inclusive workforce models. Our panelists, as you heard, bring a huge wealth of experience from various sectors, and I'm excited to hear about their insights of how apprenticeship can drive meaningful change in the public sector. The Institute for Local Government has been diving deep into this work for quite a few years now. And through the leadership of Erica Manuel and her team, they have been able to procure many different programs and grants to focus on apprenticeship programs for the local government. Within those programs, that's awards coming from the California Workforce Development Board through the HRTP program, also awarded grant funds through the Irvine Foundation, the Broad Foundation, and most recently, an award through the America's Building Apprenticeship Program through the U.S. Department of Labor. All of these resources braided to help support developing apprenticeship programs for local government. So let's jump right into some questions here. And Vince, you're the first up. Can you tell us what lessons from global apprenticeship programs can be applied to building inclusive public sector apprenticeships in the United States?
That's a great question. And what a great summit. I'm so glad that ILG brought us together on this topic. I would say, having studied apprenticeship programs across the globe, that there are many lessons, and yet no solution can really be copied and pasted and just implemented. There's no cut and paste. There's no chat GPT solution out there. The answer always lies in figuring out what problem are these approaches looking to solve, and then figuring out how to adapt the solutions to the US, California, and the local context. Having said that, of course, there are lessons worth looking at. So in my mind, lesson number one, I'll give you three. There's lots of them, but I'll give you the top three as I see them. Lesson number one is apprenticeship is this ultimate equity engine. It works as a talent development engine for the public and the private sector at the same time. I just came back from a research trip to my home country, Switzerland, and also to Germany to document the latest approaches. I toured my hometown and their apprenticeship program, and my hometown is about 38,000 people. They have 100 apprentices, from accountants to clerks to nurses to bus drivers to water purification technicians, all in apprenticeship positions. And by the way, there's a fierce competition for talent among both the public and the private sector for those young people who they want to hire into those positions. Because, well, it eases their worries about where their talent was going to come from. The mayor of my hometown happens to be a classmate of mine in middle school, said that his town is completely reliant on getting their talent through their apprenticeship programs. And the positions are popular, as I mentioned, and they're not always career positions for life, but they're always a start into a career that might lead to an advanced degree eventually, sometimes even senior positions in government. But they all have in common that they started through an apprenticeship and the exposure to a specific job that it brings. Both, and of course also this exposure into local government, into other elements of civic education that being involved in a city as opposed to, say, in a private sector also brings with it. Lesson number two, so this is the lesson about, this is equally applicable to public and private sector. That was lesson number one. Lesson number two is a little more about this equity engine. Our traditional education system is tilted in favor of those who learn in a certain way through books and through the classroom. And it favors those, frankly, who have more resources to afford taking time off and incurring debt and before they themselves earn an income. That's not really equitable. So our whole college for all approach is in part co-responsible for this income and wealth gap that we're faced with. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't actually would advocate that fewer people should go to college. I just think that all students should have a choice to learn in ways that suits them. And for that, I see apprenticeship not so much as an alternative to college, but as another way to college without debt, as I often call it. So you could also think of it as another version of AP. It's the AP of career learning that ultimately will lead to a degree, and it will also connect you to a career. And that, to me, is the ultimate equity play. Again, going back to Switzerland and Germany, they decided that they would build the system so that there's no off-ramp without a corresponding on-ramp. There are no dead ends. Everything leads to another either further degree or a further career professional development opportunity, so that essentially, without incurring any debt, you could get to a well-paying job in a reasonable amount of time. Usually by 2021, that would have been accomplished. In social science speak, we call this the permeability of an educational system. Again, the fact that you're not tracked in one way, but you are permeably able to move back and forth. That was lesson number two. Lesson number three is KISS. It stands for Keep It Simple, Smarty. I never liked the last letter, the last S in that acronym. And again, what was apparent to me in Europe, and we often come back to those systems just because they are rather simple in their conception. They are every student, every educator, every employer knows how the system works. They agree on why it's important. I watched ninth graders come through some visits to work sites and getting a briefing from the supervisor and also from the apprentice about what it is that those apprentices learned in their respective place of work. And it was just they could make a decision, they could understand what the job is about. And part of the simplicity of the design is the idea that apprenticeship programs and the underlying career pathway is best kept broad enough so that it fits a range of jobs in the same occupation. So for example, in most European countries, students who become bankers, insurance brokers, accountants, and customer service representatives in a city government, they all share the same classroom training for the most part. There are some specialized courses for the bankers that are different from the insurance brokers and the accountants, but for the most part, they actually share the same courses. And that means that you don't have cohort issues. You can build your cohort across many different specific job titles. And yet, in the workplace, they may learn specialized knowledge that not everybody shares. So keeping it, again, simple, broad, and leading towards an outcome that is equitable is kind of the key. So I'll stop there. Those are the top 3 lessons that I would share. And I'm sure we can get into more detail on any of those.
Definitely appreciate the emphasis, of course, on equitable and access. As we know, many of these programs that we're funding in the state of California is to close those gaps of equity. And I know there's many important proposals for apprenticeships and registered apprenticeships that are being forwarded to a very important department within the state of California, and that's our Department of Apprenticeship Standards. And so, Laura, great to have you this afternoon. We have a question for you to begin. Could you introduce what we know as DAS, or Department of Apprenticeship Standards? And can you share your work in contributing to the governor's goal, as we've heard from the Vice Chancellor of Workforce Development, of 500,000 apprenticeships by 2029?
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here. So much information already has touched upon what DAS does, Division of Apprenticeship Standards. What we do is actually we register apprenticeships in California. Not every state is a state agency that can register apprenticeship, but fortunately California is one of those, and we lead the way in that. So the Division of Apprenticeship Standards has both the trades, it's like everybody's familiar with the construction, building, and fire trades. But we also have apprenticeship and workforce innovation, which is really kind of your new collar apprenticeship. And a lot of people aren't familiar at apprenticeship and workforce innovation is we work more with the new collar or, more, like healthcare, advanced manufacturing, information technology. It just spans the globe. We have financial services, business services, and really you could fit these apprenticeships almost anywhere. But in this new collar world, we're able to, kind of take the best of traditional apprenticeship and combine it with the magic of these new frameworks that came into effect with AB 235 in 2017. So with that, we were able to have competency-based and hybrid frameworks instead of just a time-based program. So we're able to really get people through with more flexibility through these apprenticeship programs that are tied to, not only local education agencies, as you heard earlier, through the Chancellor's office, we're able to, connect with like so many 2- and 4-year institutions throughout California, but we're also able to connect the employer. Without an employer, you really have no apprenticeship program. So, and then from there, we're able with this new collar apprenticeship to move into with intermediaries and consortiums, to kind of fill out these apprenticeships for the 500,000 that the governor has, requested. So we do want to have those 500,000 registered apprenticeships, but it really takes building that infrastructure, and DAS is really who facilitates that. We're kind of your guidebook, for lack of a better term, in order to build those apprenticeships, to bring those stakeholders together, to where people the apprentices don't only have the related and supplemental instruction, but they also have on-the-job training. So when they're done, they have the practical and theoretical aspects of apprenticeship to where they can fit easily into the employer's culture and workforce. So it's a really diverse way to build workforce. It's great for succession planning. So DAS really helps to facilitate standards and that type of thing as well, because in order to formalize these, they have to go through a pretty rigorous review process. You know, they could actually be duly registered with the Department of Labor as well at the federal level. But we're seeing a lot of state registration happening because it has more flexibility than some of the DOL. And it just depends on what things are, but there's just so much flexibility and invitation for diverse workforce, inclusion, and just kind of building an easy on-ramp for these infrastructures in order to create ease for some of the employers. We have, for example, like UCLA is, their extension is actually doing these innovative pathways into apprenticeship. They're serving as the program sponsor, wherein not just for themselves, they could act as the local education agency as well, but they're bringing in other employers as well for several occupations. And I'll explain more about that later, but we just see this as being, you know, kind of a way to build these intermediaries and consortiums and expand in this new color space as a way to actually grow our workforce in a way that hasn't been available to us before.
Thanks, Laura, and for all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate there and your team that comes along, and you have a pretty good sized team, and I know they're very responsive, you know, to any, and would be to any county, city, or special district interested
Yes.
in getting involved as an employer. And you said it right, as Ben said, keep it simple. Keeping it simple is one of the statements you said, is you cannot have an apprenticeship without an employer.
Mhm.
And our public sector employers are those that I believe, you know, and are going to step up to the plate more than ever with the help of Institute for Local Government to assist them in their relationship with DAS. So
Yes.
with that, we'll move and pivot over to Mr. Channing, to Mr. Hawkins here. And, you know, Channing, you certainly have the experience of working in the workforce development region for some time now, working with employers. And we appreciate the work you're doing and the model program that you have. Particularly, we're interested in what you're doing in the Bay Area and in the Inland Empire, and the success you've seen in those specific areas when it comes to those counties working in the apprenticeship area and workforce development. Can you share with us a little bit about your success that you've seen there in those two areas?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to join the call with these esteemed panelists with so much expertise and background in this critical area. You know, for me, first of all, our apprenticeship program called IE Works is based in the Inland Empire. What we were able to do once, myself and a colleague, her name is now Senator Lola Cuevas Smallwood, before she was a state senator, we kind of came together through some community work we were doing. I had newly been elected in the water space, and we have been united because we come out of the labor movement about how do we create and expand the opportunities for economic empowerment for individuals in disadvantaged communities, and particularly in water. As you know, water is one of the least diverse public sector industries. I think they said the workforce has about 8% women. The numbers are also abysmal when it comes to people of color as well. And so we decided to work together to build a program. And we reached out to the Department of Labor, who at that time was very responsive to us and connected us with the High Road Training Partnership. And we were informed at that time to reach out to a current existing partner of theirs called Jewish Vocational Services, who is operating what was called Bayworks, where it's another water apprenticeship program that had already been established, had worked out some of the kinks. Its genesis was different from ours because we came from a community leader and an elected official kind of spurring it, as opposed to the industry and labor creating the impetus for the program. We went through a series of calls with them. Basically, they laid out their program. They decided they were just going to be a technical advisor. Somehow I said, you're not going to get away that quickly. You're going to be a part of our program here in Southern California. And we built our program slightly different from what they did in the Bay Area, because we were able to look at the lens from a community perspective. So we said, off the top, we wanted to target individuals who were typically left out of the workforce. So increasing the participation of women, increasing the participation of individuals of color, as well as those who have been justice involved. And so we sought out partnerships with local-based organizations who had already been doing work in that community to be a part of our application process. In addition, we also sought out our local community college, San Bernardino Community College District. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Rodriguez, the president or chancellor of the district, for her work and just immediate kind of participation. I also brought on West Valley Water District and Western Water District, IAUA, and some of the other elected officials that I knew, so we could all participate in the application process and figure out how we were going to work together to make this work. And so we used significantly borrowed from the Bay work to begin our program, but our program was a little different because of the pool of applicants. One of the things we were able to do is create a pre-apprenticeship program because of the distinction with Generation Z and their participation in the workforce. It is a completely different world in regard to their workforce readiness, especially in a blue-collar industry. And so we knew we needed a 12-week pre-apprenticeship program where we discussed the culture of work, how to, properly dress, how to have constructive conversations with your supervisor, as well as we assisted them with being able to pass water math courses. So they were able to get their T1s, D1s, T2s, and D2s from the community college district. And so that was something to find culturally competent way to teach mathematics. And so we've had 3 or 4 sets of apprentices come through the programs who were able to get assigned to 12-week apprentice programs where they were able to work in and get hands-on experience in the field operations. And I believe over 70% of them now found permanent jobs in the water industry.
Well, the technicalities that involve going into these types of areas that, again, are in many cases, uncharted waters, no pun intended on that one. But it is certainly an area that we know have a need, as you said, for more diversity, equity, and inclusion. And thank you for that work you're doing. And certainly we can definitely learn other areas for that model, which I'm certain that you'll be willing to share with many of your other colleagues out of the Inland Empire. And hopefully they will tap into your knowledge, chatting on that. When we're looking also, again, just roundtabling on a quick fire on a couple more questions one question to each of you. We know that there are challenges, in expanding just in general, the reach to find, talent, and particularly in some of these areas, as Laura had mentioned, that are in those non-traditional areas and sectors. And so as we look at that, Vince, tell us about some of those key challenges. But I know you well enough, Vince, that you turn a challenge into an opportunity. The work that we've seen that you're doing. So tell us about those, briefly, and how to expand apprenticeships in public sector.
You took the word out of my mouth, because I do think these barriers have already been mentioned, right? The complexity of the system. We said keep it simple. Well, right now it's not as simple as it could be, and so there's work to be done there, and it's not as well known. Frankly, a lot of people don't know how to access these programs and where are they. So, but I will say that the opportunity that I see, and it starts in places like this, where you bring together the employers, the public sector employers in this case, the community college system as a major provider of training and related instruction in the case of an apprenticeship. Then obviously the Division of Apprenticeship Standards as the approval entity in this. And then another key ingredient, maybe not quite as well represented here, but certainly all of these entities are in touch with them, are the job seekers and students that are future employees at these sites. And it starts pretty simple. I'm just thinking of Riverside County has a website that shows apprenticeships listings. Obviously, the employers have to come up with a classification. They have to have the opportunity to have an apprentice in their workforce, and that takes some work. But it's been done. It's been done by other agencies. So getting there is not impossible. Getting the pathway approved is key, and then it's a little bit of a chicken egg. As soon as other people see, oh, there's a path here for me to a well-paying job that has good benefits and allows me to, raise my kids in this community that I love. Well, one begets the other begets the other. So then we'll have something going. The other thing I would mention, and it was mentioned both by Vice Chancellor Cordova and also by Ms. Thompson, is this issue of the challenge to all of us to get to 500,000. We're not going to get to 500,000 unless we get our young people and the students in high schools into apprenticeship programs. There's just no real way. But if we do, then there is a real way. We have 400,000 graduates every year. If 100,000 of them became apprentices, that would go a long way. We have 500,000 opportunity youth in the state of California. They're not connected to either a career or a learning path at the moment. They're prime candidates to get into an apprenticeship slot. So between those, again, it's building the on-ramps, having the partners in the same room together, figuring out what are the jobs that are most in demand, and then getting any of those other barriers that might be there, be it transportation or some kind of supportive service that's needed. For all of those, there is an answer. And there has to be a little bit of a glue that holds these things together, usually through some intermediaries. So I see a lot of potential, as you predicted, see the opportunity. And there's a need to really reduce the complexity in starting new programs over time.
Well, as we do look at the future and want to emphasize the work of the future, we also have a large population of opportunity adults, young adults, and the adult population. We know adult education is definitely something that's being doubled down on in the state as well. So on both sides, if we do it together and we look at the adult population to be the role models for the young population to see apprenticeships are possible, that I think in partnership you have mentor-mentee relationships forming with the knowledge of people who can certainly provide that necessary bridge of between apprentice and apprenticeship, right? Those people who are willing to share their knowledge. And I think, Laura, if you can share, briefly on how DAS is addressing those apprentices most in need. What are some of those areas? You mentioned a few of them that you find that are most in need in the non-traditional. Let's talk about the non-traditional area that you're seeing.
Certainly. Thank you so much. We see that cybersecurity and IT occupations are actually, there's a high vacancy rate for those, but we're also seeing other things like arts, media, entertainment. And I know that's not necessarily like our, local government type thing, but we're seeing grant management occupations. We're seeing accountant occupations, paralegal, things of that nature, transportation, logistics. There are just a lot of different occupations that are in need. Somebody mentioned healthcare in the questions that first came up today. And I'll tell you, you look at nurses even, that's a high in demand type of occupation. So we have an LVN to RN program at the state of California, CCHCS, and it was the first of its type in the nation. And there are states that have modeled that after or since. But, that's just one of those areas where building those pathways really reaches, it could solve a lot of problems. You can actually, kind of stack these occupations as well. If you want to create like an allied health pathway, CNA or medical assistant to LVN to RN, or, I know with some of our local government, we have, accounting or management analyst type occupations as well. So I think that building these unique pathways for the employers, I think a lot of it depends on what the special districts, the local city, county government need, or even the state government. It's not necessarily always about what is the most high demand occupation or what the greatest vacancy rates are for across the state or across the nation. It really has to do with the employer. Which occupations would you like to fill in your place? Where are you needing those workforce gaps filled? Or, where are you needing succession planning strategies, or, that type of thing? So it really does come down to the employer. This is one model. This is not your grandfather's apprenticeship. Let me tell you, this is actually, these are six-figure occupations or six-figure salaries that are coming into place and growing people. They're pivoting people, even your own workforce. They could pivot people into these high-paying occupations and pivot their interest entirely. Even after COVID, we see that people are, maybe having epiphanies. We see displaced workers, that are interested in pivoting from where they've been into something entirely different. That is, high-skilled work, good paying work, very, so we're kind of rebranding apprenticeship here with this, and it really does depend on what the employers need. And then we build the pathways for that. That's the nice thing about apprenticeship in this space, because it fits everywhere. It's not easy, like Vince said. It is not easy. You get in and you think, oh my goodness, it's so much more creative, or not as simple as I'd hoped, or why can't we just, bring these pieces together, like the LEA or the local education agency, the employer and the apprentice. It doesn't always work like that. But what we are seeing is, could be much more complicated. We have unions involved and things of that nature too. And if, like in the teacher space, we have unions that, if you are in one union with one occupation and you're going to pivot to another, and it's a different union, then you have more to work through, of course. And so another thing we're seeing here is, and I mentioned UCLA earlier, and I know that ILG is influential in that as well. We love what they're doing and connecting all of these, local jurisdictions and regions and, all these different types of employers and special districts and that type of thing with our other partners, educational partners, etc. And but what we're seeing is now we're on track for the baccalaureate degrees as well, starting, generally in the teacher space. But I mean, there's opportunity here with the, uniting together in order to build these on-ramps where we can, have inclusive environment or inclusive environments really, and equitable occupations for people from all walks of life. And I think that apprenticeship offers some really interesting segues into that. It's not traditional in the space. And so I do see that those are some of the occupations that we are looking at, but ultimately I think it really is up to the employer. And, DAS, the employer comes to us, or local education, it could be anybody. We help to connect those dots. And I don't think people realize that we're a public service, free of charge. And so we're able to really kind of help them begin that search and connect them also with, what grant funds are available, also what, tax credits, et cetera. There's funding out there. And so, we can actually help kind of, fill their workforce gaps.
Well, thank you, Laura. We really appreciate, this is obviously really passionate, area for all three of you. Mr. Hawkins, I have one more question for you, but we ran out of time, so I apologize. But there are some really great questions in the chat. If you all could stay back and answer some of those, we'd really appreciate it, and type in some of those answers. So I do believe that would have some good answers to those questions, and then encourage our panelists, our attendees, to go look in the chat at those answered questions as well. As you type and answer those, that would be wonderful. We're going to pivot now into, and I want to thank you all, the three of you again, into lending your time today. We're going to take a brief poll. So we're going to switch over to Rafa. Raphael is going to do a quick poll on this session. So let's go ahead and pivot over there. Thanks again. We really appreciate the three of you. We'll give you a silent round of applause through Zoom.
Well, hi, everybody. This is Rafael Aguilera with the Institute for Local Government, Program Director for Workforce Apprenticeships and Career Pathways. We have a quick poll for you before we get into our second panel. And it's already live here. So after that amazing presentation about apprenticeship, would you consider adopting the apprenticeship model for your organization? Let's let that run for a minute. Yeah, great. That's what we want to hear, because we have a program to help nurture that space and the many occupations and jurisdictions across this beautiful state of ours. So please look to follow up with us about that. Yeah, a resounding yes. Some folks, maybe not. Yeah, you know, apprenticeships don't fit every single job occupation, so that's totally okay. A lot of maybes, I could see that. You know, this is the type of thing where it might be new and innovative for no-collar occupations, and so whoever goes first will be the trailblazer, and many will follow. All right, looks like it's stabilizing there. We got a solid response. Thanks. All right. Do I hit that button? Let's see. And let's share the results. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's hard for me to tell on my end. Great. Well, so let's go into our next panel. And I have the distinct opportunity and privilege to introduce our next panel on changing the system. Systems change. And that's certainly something I'm all about with my experience both in policy in the legislature as well as at the California Workforce Development Board, helping out, starting out the High Road Training Partnerships Initiative. Shout out to those folks on the team out there. Now, moving into this critical conversation about systems change and talking about how we can remove systemic barriers who have historically prevented many from entering and succeeding in public sector careers, this panel will focus on innovative strategies that are being used to tackle all these challenges head on, opening up new opportunities for diverse talent to thrive. And we're fortunate to have three experts with us today who bring a wealth of experience in this area. First, we have Parina Parikh, Associate Vice President at Jobs for the Future, where she leads efforts in transforming workforce systems to create more equitable opportunities. Next, we have James Reagan, Deputy Secretary for Workforce Development at the California Government Operations Agency. He's been at the forefront of implementing skills-based hiring and other innovations in state government. And finally, we have Alegria de la Cruz, currently Director of Community and Government Relations at the Dolores Huerta Foundation, and she brings deep experience from her time as the Director of Sonoma County's Office of Equity, where she led efforts to tackle systemic barriers during major crises like the pandemic and wildfires. And so sort of setting the table here, our goal with this panel is to explore how we can create meaningful, long-lasting systems change in the public sector. We'll hear about what's working, where the challenges remain, and what lessons we can apply across different sectors to build a more inclusive workforce. Virtual round of applause for our panelists that are coming on here. And welcome. Parina, let's start with you. So Jobs for the Future has been a leader in transforming workforce systems to be more equitable. How does your approach to systems change apply to local governments, and what are some key strategies you found to be most effective?
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, ILG, for the invitation to speak today. So Jobs for the Future, I guess I'll say a little bit about the organization. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the organization or been familiar with our offerings. We are a national nonprofit, and our goal is to drive transformation of the U.S. education workforce systems to achieve equitable advancement for all. So in thinking about our North Star, our goal is that in 10 years, 75 million people who face systemic barriers to advancement will work in quality jobs. So what is the problem we're trying to solve? We believe that millions of people are unfairly shut out of jobs and the chance for a quality life. So our education and workforce systems, in fact, are broken. They're inequitable, they're disconnected, they're really hard to navigate, and they're filled with barriers. So our goal is to drive transformation of those systems. And we work with public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, various change makers to make that happen. So Rafael, I'm thinking about what is our approach to working with local government? What are our key strategies? In California, which is the region that I oversee, we take a very regional approach. California is simply too vast and diverse to have a one-size-fits-all model. So when we think about systems change, it's really about the region and the place that we're working in. So we customize our approach and methodology based on the place that we're touching down in. Our goal is to help build strong regional economies. And we've done that in the Inland Empire, in the Central Valley, in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area, in the far north. So when we're brought into a region, we think about the key stakeholders and the entire workforce ecosystem and create a platform so that everyone has an equitable voice. That means bringing in the local government. That means bringing in the local workforce development board, the EDCs, the Chamber of Commerce, the union, educational providers, may they be community colleges or training providers, in a different setting, county offices of education, community-based organizations that are directly touching the participants and job seekers, and other regional intermediaries that may exist that are already collaborating. We will lean on local government to help us point us in the right direction for who these key players are to help solve a specific problem or achieve a desired goal in that region. That goal, and we just heard a lovely panel around apprenticeships. Maybe that goal is actually building pre-apprenticeships to get individuals ready for apprenticeships in the region. Maybe it's diversifying career pathways because currently the industry segmentation, they're very much relying on just agriculture or healthcare, and they actually want to broaden the career pathways. Maybe it's achieving more sustainable funding. Maybe that particular region is way too heavy relying on public funds, and they would like to know how to tap into philanthropy. So systems change can look like that. It can also look like transforming a local government's own workforce system. Maybe the local government wants to hire more youth. Maybe the local government wants to hire people with disabilities because they don't believe that their current workforce represents the population they're serving. That's something that JFF can help strategize around as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comments and for your leadership in that space, Karina. Moving to James. James, you've been leading the charge on skills-based hiring at GovOps. Can you tell us how this model is addressing some of the barriers in the public sector and what role the STARS program plays in opening up opportunities within state government? And maybe a little bit about where GovOps sits in the California state government.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you so much for having me. So a little bit about Government Operations Agency is that we are the agency in state government that really supports all of the other agencies and departments across California in providing their services, everything from contracts and procurements to tax revenue and collection, to human resources, to fleet and IT infrastructure, et cetera. And really my role as Deputy Secretary for Workforce is to support all activities related to recruitment, talent pipeline, hiring, and learning and development for the state government workforce across all job types. And so it is a big mission, and there are a lot of departments I work with across the state, including CalHR, Department of General Services, and others, to really modernize the way we do things when it comes to hiring and recruitment in state government. And so as we look towards the future and really getting a little bit more agile when it comes to our recruitment hiring across all of our job types is skills first hiring as a key here. And so we did just announce, I think, a partnership for the Opportunity at Work public sector hub around skills first hiring, which we're very excited about. And so we are partnering with them as well as several other states to look at a deep dive of how to implement skills first hiring in public sector, which, as many of you may know, is a little bit more difficult than it is in other sectors just because of the common merit-based system that we have. So one of the things we have been able to do in the meantime while we look at implementing skills first hiring is at least looking at eliminating unnecessary higher education requirements for entry-level positions and things like that. So we have over the last few years, been able to eliminate some of the higher ed requirements for entry level positions. I think it's 150 plus different job types, and really open it up. So all of that is really part one. There are, it's going to require policy change. It's going to require systems change. The second part is really meeting people where they are, because I think one of the areas for improvement here is direct partnerships with community-based organizations and local workforce boards for individuals who may be interested, who may have the misconception that you need to have a degree or some form of higher education in order to get a job with the state. And so we have launched a new Work for California campaign, hashtag Work for CA, where we are hosting specifically no degree required job fairs. Thousands of people are showing up. We're very excited about the interest, and also we've launched a what we're calling a community-based organization ecosystem to provide technical assistance directly to CBOs and all organizations across the state that provide employment, job seeking, upskilling, adult learning opportunities. We want everyone to feel like they have the information necessary to help their community members through the state's application process, which isn't always an easy process. And so there are a whole number of things that I could talk about all day, but really you could break it down into those two big buckets around skills first hiring implementation, and then also really a communications campaign, because we want people to know what we're doing, and we want people to know the opportunities available to them because the door is open.
Thanks, James. All right, moving to our next panelist, Alegria. It's my pleasure to have you here as a panelist. Our paths have crossed a number of times over the years, and mainly in the environmental space. Not everybody knows that, but I've spent a lot of time working on climate issues. And so in the EJ space, with cap and trade and all the different policies that are being implemented in the name of addressing climate change and equity, you find yourself in public service, just like me, after that type of career. And so I'm curious about your background and what motivated you to enter into public service, and what lessons did you take from that into your equity work?
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be in such powerful community with folks really thinking about what system change looks like and feels like and actually is every day on the ground. I'm currently sitting outside of the system again, back to where I started as an advocate, as a lawyer, and as a strategic thinker who has really dedicated my career to making sure that basic democracy is functioning in my community. And the way that looks is it looks like representation at all levels, reflecting the communities that we see every day and the communities that we come from. And what we know, for example, where I'm calling in from today in Sonoma County, is that that is not true. Our elected officials, our leaders inside of state and local governments do not reflect the communities that they need to serve. And as a result, there's a huge gap between the ways that people experience our systems and the kind of offering and the kind of relevance, frankly, to their daily lives about what it is that we do every day in government. And you join government to do good work, right? You really are there for all the right reasons for the most part. And so closing the gaps between those intentions and what actually is experienced in community has been one of my challenges, right, throughout my career, whether I'm standing on the outside of the system, kind of banging on the door or suing you if you're not doing it right and there's a cause of action that needs to be brought, or by sitting inside of those systems and making sure that my role is essentially to translate and to be that bridge between the way a system functions inside of an institution and the way that it's actually experienced in my community. So I started my career as a lawyer for farm workers in the community that I come from in California Central Valley, and spent time both representing workers at an individual level, lifting up some of those cases to create greater impact. I met Rafa when I was doing environmental justice work on behalf of those same communities. And again, suing state, local, and federal governments for failing, frankly, to see and serve and protect the rights rights and the health and the safety of many communities who continue to experience disproportionately negative impacts as a result of those failures to see and serve people fairly, and with honor and with respect for who they are and the kinds of needs that they might have. And I came into state service as an appointee under Governor Brown in his second term in 2011, because there was a hum inside of that administration, and that there were a number of us who had spent a lot of time kind of banging on the outside of these systems to come and take up some space on the inside. Equity folks, right? Folks working in anti-racist work talk about what it means to have a critical mass, because to be clear, systems change will never happen when one person is tokenized and put into a position of power or authority and then expected to do it all for everyone, right? Systems change is literally about every single level of decision-making power, of design, of program delivery, of funding allocation, of policy change. At every single level, you have to have people who represent the folks that you're trying to serve right there, right? That's what equity, there's lots of great thinkers about this. And one of the things that we really leaned on inside of Sonoma County when we were building this equity work inside of the county was recognizing that it's people who are closest to the challenges, right, who can see the solutions very clearly because they come from their own experiences. They come inside of their bodies. They come from the wisdom of that lived experience. What happens is that typically they are farthest from the resources and the authority to actually make those solutions happen. And so much of the work that we did inside of Sonoma County after kind of making my way through state government, and then finally into local government in Sonoma County after I finished my time at the state was recognizing the importance of building those bridges, both to have folks come inside of the system who may not have ever seen themselves up on a dais or in a community meeting or be spoken to in the language that they speak at home, or received any information in a language that was relevant to them. And so that was the kind of fundamental step that we took inside of the Office of Equity, was recognizing the importance of building those bridges and bringing that wisdom inside of our systems, especially because it's very clear that right now it still does not exist, right? That kind of representation at every single level. So I'll just give you an example. In Sonoma County, we have 84 possible elected positions, right, of folks who are policymakers and resource allocators. Latinx folks inside of Sonoma County are about 30% of the population. We currently hold 6 out of 84 of those positions, right? So the underrepresentation at the policymaking and the resource allocation is woefully insufficient. And so as a result, right, we will see those challenges continue to be experienced at every single level of government, at every single level of institution, because we still need to really make sure that those bridges are there. So I think the other thing that I just want to lift up, I'll make sure that we have some time for questions, because I hope that this is more of a conversation than us just talking at you, is recognizing the importance of inside-out strategies, right? So James and Parina both talked about the importance of having folks kind of come in, right, and bring that wisdom inside of these systems. And such a fundamental function of the work of folks inside of these systems is to make sure that, we are recognizing the importance and the privilege and the honor and the responsibility that we have to bring that wisdom inside with us, right? And then to make sure that we are doing our best to lift up those solutions and work with communities as we design things, rather than spoon feeding something that is likely not what folks need or want, because you haven't been working with them in that way. I think the other thing that I just want to say before I close here is the importance of an asset frame. Right? It is so often that we really hear institutions talk about communities, in need, or that are struggling, or that are, uninterested or disconnected or hard to reach. All of those things actually are very negative, and they don't recognize the responsibility of government creating those conditions, right? Folks are not hard to reach if you're talking about folks who I live with and who I love and who are part of my community, because that's me, right? They have been hard to reach. They have been created to be hard to reach because folks inside of government may not have that cultural responsiveness, that ability to speak those languages, right? So we create these situations that then we blame folks or we pathologize them for the challenges that they experience at the hands of our institutions. And so much of a critical function of equity work is also recognizing that we always need to be leaning into an asset frame when we talk about our communities, and doing so with love. You know, being deeply informed on communities, making sure that you stay in curiosity rather than using buzzwords that continue to kind of pathologize or blame folks for the situations that they experience. So it's always important, right, when we're talking about not necessarily lowering standards, but bringing in new skill sets, right? And recognizing, you know, the kind of value that diversifying our ideas of, you know, what a government worker looks like or what kind of languages they speak, and making sure that we're kind of shining light on those spaces that don't always get seen inside of our systems. And so with that, I'll just close that it has been, you know, the honor of my life and my work to make sure that, you know, the communities that I come from, you know, with a lot of love and pride, really see and experience what it means to have somebody like me inside of those systems, you know, working with them and serving them. And it's also really critical at every single opportunity that we have to also recognize the importance of coming back outside when we need to keep banging on those doors and making sure that those voices are heard very loudly and very clearly with a lot of love and respect. So I'll leave it there, and thank you so much, Rafa, again for this invitation today.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. Thank you, Alegria. Let's go back to Parina. You know, each one of you has the experience of, I would say, somewhat of an intermediary, right? We're neither employers, or employees per se in the systems we're trying to affect. And, you know, Parina, you have experience at the local level. And I'm curious, just in your role, previous or currently, what have been the biggest challenges you've encountered with trying to implement systems change at the local level in workforce development? And if you'd like to cover it, JFF, how are you shaping the future of workforce policy and practices to fix that?
Yeah. The challenges that we face are likely common amongst those who are working with players in the systems who are directly doing the work. So our issues often center around a given region or organization's own capacity, the people and the resources. We find that either the right people aren't at the table, or the people who really have the deep knowledge don't have the resources to even come to the table. So how do we get them an equitable voice so that they have the opportunity to participate? Worker voice is incredibly important. You must all be familiar with the High Road Training Partnership opportunities that have come into the state. All of them require some type of worker voice, and making sure that the people who represent those groups are compensated for their time. That's something that goes unnoticed sometimes when we bring these groups to the table because we want them to participate in the conversation. Sometimes these folks are not compensated fairly, and then we don't attract those folks in making some of our key decisions that will impact policy. So what can JFF do in that case? What do we do? How do we resolve those challenges? One, we make sure that we have funding and support for people to be able to participate and give their time. And sometimes our ask is a bit more technical from the region. Maybe they want to know, how can we braid public and private funding to be able to sustain a given program that is beneficial for their community? Or a board might ask us, hey, we've got this WIOA funding and we can never spend it down, but we've got all these participants that aren't getting served. Well, there might be an inefficiency that we can help correct. So optimizing the function of a board, making the board a little bit more human-centered. A lot of boards we find operate one-stop shops in their communities, and they're not really meeting the needs of the customer. They're simply a board that exists because the DOL has funded them. Well, how can we make them more human-centered and actually make them a part of the community and have them understand what the community actually needs? You know, other issues might center around lack of focus. Sometimes the board is just trying to do everything for everyone, and they're getting into the shiny object syndrome, and they don't know what is really going to drive impact in their organization and what's going to drive impact in their communities. So maybe it's that they need help with a strategic plan, and that's something that Jobs for the Future has a lot of experience partnering with different regions and organizations on, because we find that without a strategic plan, you really don't know how you're going to meet the needs of your community. You don't have any connection to the community's regional plan. And there's all these resources that can be used, whether it come from the philanthropic sector or public funds, that can be better utilized to help a given community. So thinking about how can we tailor their strategic plan to be a little bit more meaningful to the participants that they're serving, and the type of demographic that they're serving, and match really their plan to their demographics and the demographics that they are seeking to empower. So that's sort of the JFF piece at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, where I help build programming. A lot of it was thinking about how can we help those individuals that might not be eligible for federal funding still get the resources they need to be able to live a quality life. And thinking about what is that sort of layer of individuals that often gets overlooked. How can we build sector pathways in what we call priority sectors, which have high demand careers, high demand occupations, offer career mobility, offer the ability to start at a self-sustaining, family-sustaining wage without necessarily having a 4-year bachelor degree. So thinking about what those priority sectors are and how to build career pathways so people have an opportunity to get the occupational training, the sort of work readiness training, we call it, and then the work-based learning experience that they need to be able to get that entry-level full-time job. Oftentimes we find that people can have all the training and the certificates, they just don't have the work-based learning experience to be able to show and demonstrate that they can do the work. So we have a lot of experience sort of working at that systems level, but then also have experience working at the individual community level to be able to impact change. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Karina. Man, just so much wisdom and experience. Folks who have been doing this work for a long time. You know, I do want to turn it over to a question we have from the audience, and so this is it, guys. We're gonna engage everybody here. So honest, you know, hot take here. You know, human resources. This is from, I'll leave them anonymous, but it's HR is not known as a center of innovation in organizations, and is inherently risk averse and reactive by nature, resistant to change, perhaps. And you know, that perhaps this is a good one for you, James. How is the state modeling hiring for desired skills at the state level? You know, I've been in the state for a while, and to me, this is a very innovative practice. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how it came to be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I definitely see the sentiment there with you know, human resources shops not necessarily being known for being the center of innovation. I think in our case at the state, it really is a culture shift first. It's a culture shift first to go from a slightly more rigid hiring structure to one that includes that sort of inside out strategy that we were just hearing about, where we're going directly to hear from applicants, both successful and unsuccessful applicants, and saying, what was your experience? What was hard about this? What was good about this? And really implementing that natural innovative principle of user-centered design in every service we offer, and getting to know the boots on the ground barriers to what people are experiencing when they're trying to seek a job with us. What I don't want is to be the employer where you need to know the secret handshake to get in. That's not the goal. That's actually exactly opposite of the goal. We want everyone to know that this is a process that we're working on. And I would argue that part of what the state is doing is flipping that sentiment to make it so that human resources does become a center for innovation, because it influences so much about the makeup of the workforce. And in particular, things like skills first hiring is not the only thing we're working on, but is probably one of 2 or 3 dozen projects we're working on to make the hiring process more equitable and efficient. But skills first hiring, as an example, really is like, not to get too grandiose, but I call it one of the innovations that'll help us accomplish all the other innovations. Because an innovative idea is only so good unless you have the right people behind it to make it happen and make it real. And part of the way we're going to do that is through skills first hiring, as well as improving the hiring process, making it so that it takes into account real world feedback from anyone who's willing to work with us on what their experience is. And in some cases, it's a negative experience. And so it's our responsibility to take that information, work within our human resources structure with partners like California Department of Human Resources, our Office of Data and Innovation, our local partners, and partners across the community-based organization ecosystem I was just mentioning, to really get this right. It's too important not to. And in our case, in human resources, it's one of those things that we do want to flip the sentiment and make it so that it is a center of innovation by taking into account real world feedback and having real partnership that doesn't involve just checking off a box to say we talk to people.
Hey, thanks for that. Yeah, it's an honest response, and you guys are really doing the hard work. Want to be respectful. I know, Parina, you said you had a hard stop at 2:55. Did you want to get in one last final word before you hit the road?
No, just appreciate the opportunity to speak here and would love to have any kind of follow-up conversations. My panelists were just so thought-provoking. I'd love to follow up more. And happy to answer questions offline and engage on how JFF can be additive to the work that you're already doing.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have you. Appreciate you taking the time. Okay, well, Alegria, I wanted to ask you, this is my go-to here, but please feel free to also respond to the question that James.
Sure. I was just going to say, in equity efforts, every single person has to be an equity champion inside of a system in order for it to happen. And so HR needs to be held accountable to be an equity champion if anything is going to change. And, that is one of the things that I'm so happy and proud of in Sonoma County, is the way that we built a team that had dedicated staff and leadership in every single department whose responsibility it was to take steps forward on really creating equity inside of their systems. And even if that was learning about equity and doing some deep training and some hard conversations as staff and leadership, that's a step. And so, it's again, this question of accountability. Don't silo it, don't put it on one person and think that it's going to be done. And just lifting up what James said about, needing to make sure that every single person is comfortable talking about institutional racism and how to solve it, because that's ultimately at the core of what it is that we're trying to solve for when we talk about representation and changing systems inside of our institutions.
Alegria, you have a really unique experience, I think, of being in the Sonoma County region during some epic, hard times with a pandemic and wildfires happening all simultaneously, it seems, and trying to bridge systems in the space. I would love to hear your, something I read about and certainly saw myself, but the disparities in implementation of relief efforts in Sonoma County during those times. What was it like? What was the secret sauce for your successful sort of systems change on the fly in crisis in Sonoma County, if you want to talk about it?
I think folks who have done emergency ops work inside of institutions know that it's a place of incredible innovation and of opportunity, because you have everybody who needs to be part of a decision in one space, and the urgency is real. The urgency is, people living or dying as a result of your decisions. And it creates, the conditions for real transformation, especially when you're making sure that you have the right folks in the room. So I'll just tell a very quick story, right? It's October 9th of 2017, and the Tubbs fire has just roared across 6 lanes of freeway in Little Santa Rosa and devastated about 5,700 homes, right? Something that we had never experienced before. I don't think anybody in the country at that point had experienced an urban wildfire of that magnitude and scope. And I was one of 2 lawyers in our office who was able to make it inside of the Emergency Operations Center that night, just because of roads and traffic and everything else. And one of the things that happened was I'm in this EOC and everything is happening at once, but I don't hear Spanish. And I know that there are significant numbers of folks in my community that are monolingual Spanish speakers, if not monolingual Indigenous language speakers and many other languages, and I wasn't hearing anything. And so I asked, are we doing this? And the answer was can you? And my answer was, of course, right? Because that's what happens when you have representative diversity inside of our institutions, is that allows for, these skill sets to come forward and to be offered into, creating greater good, greater impact for our communities as a whole. And so, again, it's just, and so making sure that you have the right folks in the space is sometimes the very first and most important step that you can do in order to create some of those changes. But the solutions, in every single level of, what is supposed to be there to help people recover, what is supposed to be there to help people, find their way through emergency response in a devastating and super stressful situation. We also see what happens when it's politicized. So in Sonoma County, just as an example, it was during the Trump administration. We have a significant number of folks who are, active in the ag world. We also know that that is a population that is largely undocumented, and so we had folks who had been just devastated by the fires, lost work, lost homes, and were intentionally pushed away from systems that were supposed to be there to help them to recover from this devastating wildfire, and they were left with nothing. And so I think the other thing is to really make sure, how are we seeing the gaps, the holes that we have created? And even if we haven't created them, we've inherited them. And then it's our responsibility to mend those gaps, to mend those holes. Otherwise, we are essentially condoning and allowing them to continue. And that is unjust. That does not help to create equitable responses. And so again, in this emergency setting, with this urgency and with all the right folks in the space, we were able to develop strategies and solutions at a local level to fill those gaps, to mend those holes, and to make sure that we didn't have thousands of people who we care about and depend on every day to create an economy that's as strong as ours is, just falling through the bottom of our safety net systems. And so, again, that's equity. Right. And that has to do with representation, and that has to do with who's in the room, and that has to do with, making sure that the people in the room have the space and the power and the authority to lift up that lived experience and that wisdom and bring it right into the middle of your solutions.
Man, yeah, I can't tell you how impactful that is to me. I could see my family in those impacted. I could see, language barriers being bridged, and I appreciate you for stepping up. James, whether it's language barriers, generational divides, institutional status quo, within the next couple minutes, could you tell me what your secret sauce is and within state government, how you're making that change?
It's a great question. And I think one of the things that we do come back to is that in the past, there hasn't always been a good dedicated strategy of meeting people where they are. And really going out. Sometimes there is no replacement, no good replacement to being feet to the pavement. Let's go out. Let's talk with people. Let's bring resources with it that are transcribed and translated in multiple languages. Let's ensure that we have that representativeness on the team so that when we go out, language is spoken is not a barrier. And let's make sure that as a state, we have those resources available on hand and really kind of going out, meeting people where they are. And that's not necessarily a cutting edge, innovation necessarily, but also it's something that it gets lost. Sometimes the work is so focused on that next great web portal, the next great functionality in an application portal in our case. And those things are important. But also, that's not all. It doesn't address some of the audiences that we really want to be able to reach who may not have access to that high-speed internet, digital devices, or individuals who may not get access to the language services in order to be able to go and find a job successfully. And so a couple of the things that we are doing is feet to the pavement. Let's go meet people where they are. Regardless of where you are in the state, let's go out and do it. And so it's been really a series of very necessary, very rewarding partnerships in communities everywhere. And I keep going back to our community-based organization ecosystem. And part of why I go back to it is because I consider it one of our successes in this effort. We have 60 CBOs that offer employment services across the state, across huge amounts of geography. We will grow it as much as we need to. All are invited. All organizations who provide that type of service are invited to join with us. We'll come and visit you. I want to, hear exactly what are the challenges that you see in people trying to get that rewarding and mission-driven work in government so that we can get to that level of representation where the services just become better. They just become better over time. And so it is sort of a strategy that is not new, but it is something that sometimes in the past has been missing. And so we're just tackling that.
Well, thanks, James. Thanks, Alegria and Farina. Oh my God, what an amazing panel. We can tell from your experience that systems change is not easy, but that it is well worth it. And I hope these examples were useful for everyone that was on the call today. I'm sure they were. So now let's move to a poll. Let's see who's ready to do systems change. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so we've got a poll, and we are going to ask you, I think you are seeing it now on the screen. We're just going to ask you one quick question, and the question is your agency actively addressing systemic barriers and issues in the public sector workforce? It is a hard thing. We've just heard that. I think we've been inspired by what we've heard, and I think we've heard some key themes, right? That their worker voice is key, that we have to engage across a number of modalities, a number of partners. The ecosystem has to be broad, and we have to center not only worker voice, but community voice, depending on what kind of programs you're running, and partnerships are massive as well. I think it's really honest to say, yes, we are trying, right? Because it's like a dynamic process. The work is never done. I love to see that some people think they are rock stars. I absolutely appreciate that. Thank you for fighting that good fight. The ones that say no, thank you for being honest. And if you're not sure, that's great too. Thank you for being honest. It's hard work. And there are a number of things certainly that ILG will want to do over the course of the next few months and years through this work, because it's never ending, that we will do to support local governments and others in this space as they are trying to make the systems change possible, realistic as well, right? Given some of the systemic issues, right? And changing barriers, right, that happen over the course of each cycle, whether it's related to a political cycle or not. And we want to provide you with those tools and those resources and help build those relationships. So shout out to our public engagement team that's been doing this in some way, shape, or form for a while to help build authentic engagement. And then pairing that with things like workforce development is really key for the topic we're talking about today. So thank you all for providing that feedback. It looks like we've got 67% of you trying, 5% of you are rocking it, 12% are not doing it, and 17% aren't sure yet. And that's okay too. So much appreciation to those that responded. And I will make sure those results were shared. Did we see them on the screen yet? I think we did. Fantastic. And we'll move on. All right, so it's time for our next panel. And this next panel is on strategies for recruiting diverse talent and retaining it, which is also key, because we heard in our earlier poll that we really do want to make sure that retention is part of this discussion. And I'm so excited to have this panel where we're going to explore some strategies for ensuring that our public sector workforce really reflects the diversity of the communities that we serve. Our speakers in this panel are fantastic. They're going to provide some insights into the creative and targeted recruitment efforts that they have implemented in their various sectors and their various agencies to engage young people and underrepresented communities. So the speakers we have, you can see their names and their photos on the screen, and we're going to show them in just a second. Dr. Deb Moy is the co-founder and senior strategist for California Transit Works. She's going to talk a little bit about recruiting diverse talent in public transit, and specifically around some special district areas around the state, which we are very excited to hear about her programs. And in many ways, we are a fan. We're a fan, and we can't wait to hear more from Deb. And then we also have Kevin Daniel, as a workforce development project manager with the city of Sacramento. He's going to talk a little bit about innovative recruitment strategies that are going to really help potentially you attract young people and diverse communities into these public sector jobs. And he's done this for a number of organizations, including the city of Sacramento, but he also has a long history with the Urban League. And that's where I first met Kevin. So great to see you both on the line, and happy to have you join us today. We're going to start actually with Deb, and we're going to just open it up with a little bit of background, because I don't know that everyone is familiar with your fantastic work. Deb, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your organization, the strategies that have really been successful for you in recruiting and retaining this diverse talent that we're talking about. and specifically the work you're doing, obviously, with public transit agencies. We saw in our occupational survey, in one of the first questions we opened this summit, that public transit was one of those hard to fill, hard to keep occupations. Tell us about it. Tell us what you're doing, Deb.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you to the ILG for inviting us to present at this great webinar that you're having today. California Transit Works, sometimes we call ourselves the best kept secret in the state. So hi, Erica, thank you for that. Officially, organizationally, we're a consortium of public transit agencies, their transit unions, educational institutions, and community organizations, but that doesn't really say who we really are. Who we really are current and retired transit industry folks who really believe deeply in addressing the issues that the transit industry faces through labor management partnerships. And we're guided by the voices and the actual experiences of our frontline workers who know best how to do the work. So if you want to say in a nutshell, what we do is we create spaces for these things to happen, that we provide technical and expert assistance, and that we're building community, not only throughout California public transit industry, but also within the United States and Canada. And I think our hallmark is worker voice and frontline workers. And so what I'd like to do to introduce who we really are is to show a quick little video. If you don't mind, please queuing up the video. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. We're just going to get that screen full up if you can. Awesome. Thank you.
Alameda, Contra Costa serves Oakland, Richmond, Alameda County, some of the most transit-dependent population in the United States. We have an opportunity to create living wage jobs for our disadvantaged community members, union jobs. We have an opportunity to serve our community. After they graduate from bus operator training, we assign them a mentor, a veteran operator who's a safe space for that new operator to call day or night, 24/7. One larger example of an incredible benefit from a true worker-centered, worker voice, labor management partnership.
This is what it's about, standing up together to make it better. And when you do that and you give 100%, you change the life of somebody like me who grew up here who had no hope.
My proudest moments is being able to drop off my son on time to the babysitters and seeing how proud he was of me. I wasn't used to that.
Getting to know some of our peers that we don't get to talk to on a daily basis and just find out their backgrounds, and that was a plus. They kept us engaged. They gave us all the tools we needed.
Maybe like something like a family, because the introduction, that's very good. It's like something feeling like, oh, you are safe here.
One of the students from the pre-apprenticeship programs was already having an issue trying to get his learner's permit. He reached out. He said, "Rich, I'm ready to give up. This is too much work." I said, "No, we're not doing that."
I think mental health is so important. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a mentor, not to just to help students with routes and, you know, passengers and etc. I wanted to also make sure that they were doing good in their daily lives.
You got your sister's what, August 8th? Oh yes, mine's is August 19th. We were so close in timing and everything. I'm just glad you got to go through it first. Well, I'm glad that you're getting through it.
And when we can do that together with agencies like AC Transit and VTA and Metro and Cleveland and King County and everybody else that I may have missed, that is how we change public transit.
This is our website QR code if you'd like to quickly scan it.
Sorry, we took it down, but if we want to, what
All
we'll
right.
do is we'll make sure we can drop that in after the fact, and we'll put a link in the chat if we can.
Okay.
If we can, tech team, we'll drop that link in to make sure all of our attendees can see it.
Thank you. Just a quick note, hopefully that gave you a little sense of who we actually are. It's very hard to describe. We were just meeting on this all day today about how do we actually describe who we are. Mike Kirsch, who you saw there is introducing, he was actually the founder of the very first public transit labor management partnership at Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. Jermaine Gibson, who you saw speaking right after him, was one of the young people that Mike was talking about, he comes directly from East Oakland, and he was one of those people who had no hope. And he has now gone on to become, through a various of these programs, he's now the National Director of Apprenticeships and Workforce Development for the Amalgamated Transit Union, and helping to bring these programs all across the country, both in the United States and Canada. So I just wanted to footnote that video that way to show that when you actually do approaches like this, just the kind of things that can come out of it, you know, at its heart, our recruitment and retention strategies in public transit come from the frontline workers themselves, who both live in these communities and or they work in these communities by delivering public transit service and bus and rail. So they really do have the clearest insights into what it takes to bring in folks from diverse populations and to keep them there. And this isn't a one-time thing. This changes over time. I was listening to one of the earlier speakers who spoke about the impact of the Tubbs fire. That's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. People know, we went through that from public transit. It's like, suddenly, what do? One of our agencies is down. We've got people who need things. That general manager turned around and just started deploying buses with water, everything else that you can think of. See, so when we say that we really serve the community and we're part of the community, we really take that to heart. What's important for us here, I think you could see from the video first, when we say safe space, that's a nice phrase, but what it really means is to listen to what folks have to say and then to take action on their knowledge and wisdom. What is it that works and what is it that gets in the way? And we have those frank discussions in a place where, honestly, sometimes they don't get listened to, or they're not even given an opportunity to be listened to, let alone be able to lead their own programs. And I think, as you could see from a lot of the video, these programs are run by the frontline workers themselves. So this peer mentoring program, for example, came out of us talking to frontline workers and managers what would actually be needed to address this huge issue of recruitment and retention. That's what it really comes down to. And then it does mean, like, how do we actually mentor? What does it take to be a mentor? How do agency leaders come to trust their frontline workers to do this work? It wasn't something that they were used to doing. By asking bus operators, they're used to having bus operators or mechanics just go do your work. Not, let's get in a room and think about that, and let's really listen to what people have to say and understand what it is that they're saying and try to do something about that. This is that environment that we really help folks with, and these are the kind of programs that come out. This takes labor management partnerships to create these kinds of spaces and opportunities. And it does mean that labor and management learn to work together in new ways. That's a trust thing, frankly, that takes place over time. And there's turnover, as you all know, people move between jobs. So this is a constant process that goes on. But it also gives our partners, the community colleges, the adult education programs, high schools, community organizations, a chance to all learn together and work together in new ways also. And that's been a real growing opportunity. I think you saw a couple of folks from our Golden Gate Transit pre-apprenticeship program that runs through Santa Rosa Junior College. That program evolves every day, and it's really wonderful to see the responsiveness. When you can have a system that can respond almost minute by minute to what it is that people need and constantly improve and adjust and change. We're not taking years to devise the perfect program. We're really learning as we're going, but keeping that orientation always on we're going to be able to do better and address these kinds of questions. So with this approach, we've graduated more than 500 apprentices from our longest standing labor management partnership program. We currently have 12 transit agencies in California and more than 100 across California, United States rather, that are utilizing this approach. So I'd be happy to go into that more during the QA, but thank you.
Amazing, Deb. Thank you so much. And I'm loving the transition from the previous panel to this one, where there was so much conversation around systems change and really making sure that we're centering, you know, worker voice, that we're centering the community. And then here we are with the strategies that you're talking about for actually recruiting and retaining. And it's the same themes, right? The same themes of making sure that those that are, I think, to the very salient point of thinking about assets rather than deficits, you know, how do we bring people with this amazing lived experience into the room, to the table, to talk about what they need, what they want, how they can engage in this process and make the workplace work for them, and collaboratively make it work for all the parties involved. And it seems like with your approach across the country, it's working in California and elsewhere. I really loved the video. That was really, really inspiring. I'm glad we were able to show it and that the tech worked. And for those of you that are looking and didn't get a chance to see it, that video link is now in the chat. You can click on that at any time. And it also has that QR code. We'll also flag that we will share contact information where appropriate after this summit with our panelists, or through us with our panelists for you. So we'll make sure that you have access to their information that they reference and to the programs that they're talking about. One other note that I will give so that we can manage our time well, we want to make sure you get a chance to ask questions of this amazing group. So at any point during this discussion, drop your Q&A in and we'll fit them in during our conversation. Try to make sure that you get some of those questions answered real time. All right, Kevin, you are up. Tell us about the city of Sacramento. Would love to understand in particular some of the specialized and targeted work that you've done around recruitment and retention for Sacramento region in general, city of Sacramento in particular. Tell us what you got, Kevin.
Thank you, Erica. I first like to start off just the concept. I believe going forward, we have to grow our future workforce, right? And to do that, we need to begin focusing on our youth. Creating pathways to public sector jobs. So for the city of Sacramento, 85% of our city's workforce budget is targeted to youth 16 to 24. And it targets our priority neighborhoods. Those are those communities that have been historically under-resourced, have the highest poverty, has the highest crime. We know the story. And we have several programs that's focused on this work. We have Youth Service Corps. It was formerly known as Californians for All. We have our 1,000 Strong program, and we have programs from our CARES funding. So we have like this two-pronged approach, of building pathways for our priority neighborhoods into our public sector jobs. We are looking for careers that have low barrier entry points, based on certification and/or on-the-job training. But we're also reaching out to our college students who also come from our priority communities. So on that first approach, we look to the city for what city positions are struggling to be filled, and how do we prepare our youth for these positions? We talk to public works, utilities, youth park and recs, climate action, engineering, IT department, and we created a list of intern positions that will hopefully prepare young people and lead them into full-time careers in the public sector jobs. So here how we do it. We work with our local CBOs to help recruit, provide employability skills and job placement. Now, because we don't have an unlimited number of public sector jobs at the city, we have to reach out to other public sectors. We place folks at Sacramento County, at the libraries. We also place youth at working on our local CBOs, giving them more resources to serve their own communities. This summer, our goal was to give as many high school youth an opportunity to work as possible. We placed 80 youth at our Summer at City Hall program, another 54 youth through our 1,000 Strong program. We also placed youth at local parks, community centers, also at CBOs so they can help with cleaning up abandoned sites, feeding families, homeless residents, and other civic engagement projects. So our second approach is we focus on youth who are in colleges, right? And as well as those who went to college, but for whatever reason left. Now, they may not have completed college, but we know that they met the A through G requirements to enter college. They have the necessary reading skills, and writing and comprehending, but for whatever the cause was, they just didn't succeed in college. Now, with that program, we have like 11 student interns working in our IT department right now. And these are all college level students, and they become a valuable asset to the city. And after graduating, they have an opportunity to have a full-time career at the city. In this past year alone, we have placed over 670 youth through our Youth Pathway programs. You're on mute, Erica.
Oh, sorry. I just got the notice. I said, that's fantastic. Your statistics are really staggering. And I think, when we think about bringing youth in, I have to say there's a follow-up question. Every person I talk to goes, I would love to, but I don't have the time to manage all those kids. When I think of the young kids, right? You're like, I don't have the time. And then your definition of youth is pretty broad. It's maybe, it's not necessarily those that are in high school, but it's also, those that are maybe the younger ages that are still of working age and adult. Can you talk a little bit about how you might have managed that in this process? Because I think that's one of the first things that comes up when our local agencies say, I'd love to have an intern, but.
So I think about this, and it's a generational question, right? The real fear is we don't understand those young people. That's the real fear. And so what I would say is our young folks are different. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different. They work different, and and we don't understand them. So we'll look at their behavior and say, oh, they're lazy. Oh, they're not that serious. But it's just a misunderstanding. And I think one of the things we do two things. First thing we do, we also provide case management, right? So we encourage that employer, you have any kind of issues, call the case manager, right? And the case manager can help walk you through some of these things. And then we also, our case managers are working with the youth, because the youth are also having challenges and struggles also, because they're having generational issues also. Now, one thing I would like to implement, we haven't done it yet, but is create a training program for supervisors and key workers for public sector jobs. It helped bridge that gap so they can understand the mindset of our young people, because it's just different. It's just different. And I think they got some things right. And of course, we got some things right too, but merging the two together really makes it work a little bit better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the generational differences. It's the understanding the basic technical and administrative skills. I know that you're working through that with your case managers I know that in a program we've worked on with the city of Sacramento, you also done some basic education for these youth as well. So they're not coming in fully green. They kind of know what to deal with in the workplace. And I think that definitely helps with the success. And helping maybe your supervisors feel a little bit more comfortable. I know that local governments will always have capacity issues. And I think, Deb, one of the things that jumps out at me when we're hearing about your program in particular is that you've got this phenomenal model, and you talked about how you are wrapping your arms around all of these team members, making sure that that's a safe space, but that they also feel heard and listened to. And there's a deep relationship and time and mentorship that is built into the programs that you manage. How have you managed that? The same issue, right? Not necessarily with youth, but in general with bringing on new employees to the public sector, helping them get up to speed. How are you managing that capacity issue with the staff that might say, I'm already overloaded with my own job, and now I got to manage and supervise somebody else?
That's an excellent question. And I think that question of manpower and resources, I don't know very many people in transit, especially on the operations side, who say they have all this extra time to do more work. And in fact, one of the first questions we usually get is, wait a minute, you're asking me to do something more? And I think what we point out and what is actually true is that as you implement these programs, other work that may have been taking up time actually decreases. So for example, I'll just go there with training. If you're having a high turnover of 50% and now you're churning through 50% more trainees, that's a lot of time, money invested into that. And now you're bringing them on board and going through all that. If you have a more stable workforce, you're not spending so much time on all of that, time and money. So that's like one example. Another example is if people really understand and address these issues, you're not going to run into safety issues or customer complaint issues or grievances or any of those other kinds of things. So there is a real balance between that kind of work. So on the one hand, it might feel like more work, but the overall benefits actually weigh itself out to almost being less work, to the point where you're actually able to bring on new kind of programs that you really wanted to do in the past, but never had time to do. It's an excellent question though, and that's something we address everywhere.
And it sounds like what you're saying is it's reimagining and rethinking the investment, right? You're investing some time now, but you're saving time on the back end. You're saving time later. You're reimagining your workforce, and you're providing, you are putting some faith, right, in the new team members and in the process, but it is paying dividends. And I think when we hear about, the cost benefit analysis of a registered apprenticeship program or a pre-apprenticeship program or even an internship, there is an investment of time, there is an investment potentially of some dollars, but the ROI in the end is higher, and the stats do demonstrate that. So thank you for that insight. That was an off-scripted question, but I just had to ask it because sometimes we get that. And
well, this is the real question.
This is the real question people want to know.
I'll give everyone a concrete example of that, because I've heard this thing about apprenticeships before, and I was a former apprentice, full disclosure, in another industry before too, and ran into the same issue. We had a lot of pushback on our maintenance, and I know someone had posted a question about what about jobs with a lot of technical requirements. Excellent. Maintenance obvious has lots of technical requirements. If I asked you how many computers are on a bus, you probably didn't know there were computers on the bus. And in fact, there's at least 70, if not more, computers that folks have to learn how to diagnose and repair as they do part of their go about their job in maintenance. And so when we first started a service worker to service mechanic apprenticeship, all kinds of complaints about how much time this was taking, et cetera, et cetera. But as soon as those service worker apprentices, service mechanic apprentices learned how to do preventive maintenance, suddenly that freed up whole groups of people from having to do preventive maintenance. And they now had time to do other things. So pretty quickly within that first 2 or 3 months of the program starting, people started to see, and now they know that when this program comes around, this will be a benefit they have.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so let's dive in a little bit. And I know that, Kevin, you talked a little bit about recruitment of your diverse talent and your youth in particular. Let's go in a little bit about retention, because we did hear and see in a poll at the very beginning of our session and summit that people are worried about retention. And obviously it helps to bring them on with a very strong network. And we're seeing that with some of the work that you're all doing. What are you doing in the retention space? Can you tell us what long-term strategies you're using, not only to keep people, but to keep, or not only to get people, but to keep them? Because that's also important given that investment that you're already making to bring them in.
So, we heard earlier about system change. Well, there needs to be a system change when it comes to workforce. I've been in workforce for over 30 years. And during that time, I've been able to work at every level, from a summer youth casework manager to vice president of programs. And our approach, we hit youth with first a workforce training program. They're their introduction to the system. At the end of that workforce training program, and then we do things in reverse. We go, you know what? They might be sure they need some help. So then we give them a case manager or a mentor. Then the case manager or mentor said, you know what? They need some help with their social emotional learning. Then we apply that. Then someone goes, they're just not stable. We need to keep them in a stable environment. That's why they're missing class or coming in late. So we do stability. So part of retention is reversing that cycle. You should start off with stability. Let's make sure that young person is stable first, right? Sometimes before they go into training, they may need to go get their GED. They may need to get some stopgap employment just to stabilize their household first, right? And then you work on that social emotional learning. They got to have that growth mindset where they go, I believe I can be successful. Then after you give them that, then you give them case managers, mentors, life coaches, and then we put them into the work training program. So we just reverse that cycle around. And I'm going to tell you that your success rate shoots out the roof. Now you have people who show up to class every day, who are self-confident, and they already got mentors and case managers they have relationships with. So that's the reverse step. And after you get to that point, then you come back with professional development. Now we want them to be the future leaders. So we got to give them professional development, show them how to move up the pathway. Don't just stay where you got into the job. How do I move up? Now we know about public sector jobs, there's upward mobility. There's free training. You can apply for jobs. Somebody will help you get through. So we have to teach that whole process. This retention begins by just changing our current system of workforce development.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a couple great questions in the chat that I want to uplift, or not in the chat, in the Q&A. So don't forget, drop it into the Q&A. And it was actually linked to a question I was going to ask Deb, because she touched on it a little bit. And there's this question about sort of the labor management and potentially unions. And you started to touch on the labor management relationship as it relates to the programs that you have worked on. But there is this maybe disconnect, and maybe it's perceived, could be a misconception, but can you talk to us about how it has worked for you between management and unions, labor unions in particular, to understand this worker voice discussion? Because it is uplifted in a lot of our funding, whether it's philanthropic or whether it's something like the high road training partnerships or others. Worker voice is key, but that isn't always in alignment with what has been done and how we have approached public sector employment in the past. Can you talk about how that's worked in the program that you've worked on? And Kevin, if you have a response to this as well, happy to take it. But we'll start with Deb.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because worker voice, as you said, you can see it in almost every, from the federal down to the local level. People like to sprinkle that term in there, as well as peer mentoring, but it means a lot of different things to different people. And what I found doing this work for more years than I'm going to admit right now, and as well as in our collective experience, is that when you thoughtfully ask workers, what would not so much what are the problems, but what could make things better, you hear the responses. They're very professional and very thoughtful, and it's really creating that space to let those voices be heard. And what I found is that being able to bring those responses directly back to both the labor and the management sides, it's hard to deny what people's actual experiences and insight is. And I think as we do that over time, that's what actually creates, and it doesn't just happen overnight. This happens with to greater and lesser degrees, depending on how far you go with your program. But that's where I believe people really understand worker voice at a deeper level, just like the video that we showed earlier. When you hear people actually talking about what this means to them or what they have insight, what wasn't in the video was, we designed this, we tried this, we know how to, you know what I mean? That's what really drives it. And I think when you have that action component, that people can see, wow, they listened to the workers, they tried this out, it actually worked. Little by little, that's where you really start understanding just how powerful worker voice can be. But also, what does it take to kill it? And I'll just go there. And you kill it by not listening to people or promising to do something and then it doesn't happen.
Doing it.
You know, or it doesn't happen, and this is a more typical situation, it doesn't happen because behind the scenes in the bureaucracy, things take time. It goes to 20 departments. Meanwhile, the workers are sitting there tapping their fingers saying, where's the water cooler we asked for when it was hot? And now it's cold and they don't have the water cooler. See, so if nobody is communicating what's happening, just like they would to each other, then that could also kill it too on both ways. Because then workers aren't going to speak up anymore because they don't think they're being listened to. So it really is a two-way street. And I really thank you for that question and whoever else asked that in the chat I saw in the Q&A, because I think it's not easy, but it's definitely can be done as long as we take certain basic steps to make it happen.
I love that. And I also have experienced that a little bit of it is about the narrative, right? So sometimes there are words that become trigger words, right? They become, sometimes in the last few months and maybe year or so, you know, the word equity, DEIB, some of those kind of phrases and other things have caused people to kind of turn away. They're not quite comfortable with some of the terminology. Worker voice may have a similar kind of reputation or transition into that reputation where people don't always really know all the details of it, but it seems like a departure from what has been and maybe a change that's uncomfortable. And I do appreciate, Deb, that I think through the process of explaining how it can work and what it is, it may create opportunities for us to really engage, right, with all sides and make sure that there's an awareness of what it really is and how it can actually benefit not only the employee, but also the employer. And a lot of times it's things that the employer already wants, right? So these are very, very good. It's a good thing to hear from the field. So thank you. Thank you for that. Anything to add, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I had an experience working with some of the labor unions. I was consulting with another city, and we were developing some pathway programs. And to my surprise, it got halted. And I was like, "What's the problem?" They said, "Well, we have an issue with the labor, and they don't like the program." So, you know, during that process, I learned a few things. So, with the city of Sacramento having that experience, we started with pain points, and that's why we started with what positions are you struggling to fill. So we came at it from a different point of view. What are your pain points? Where are you struggling? So when our program came into place, it was coming into place to deal with some of them pain points. So we never had any friction with the program here in Sacramento. We were aware of things we need to be aware of, but because we came at it from that point of view, we became an asset and not a point of contention.
Great, great. Thank you. So we've heard a couple of things that I think are really pivotal that I think, and actually dovetail really nicely, like I said, the previous panel that might actually translate really well to the next panel as well. You've got some data, Kevin, that you've used. You know, we're talking about those terms like they're underrepresented, they're under-resourced. You're looking at your communities of concern or your communities that are maybe your priority communities. And the way that you've done that is through data. And I know that you have identified those communities. Your budget reflects those priorities, and you've allocated funding to make sure that you can prioritize some of those things. And so I appreciate that you have leveraged a number of resources to build out your program, to build out your strategy, and then to execute it. Not every local agency has certainly those resources and that access. But in the next panel, if I may tease it, we're going to hear a little bit about that potential labor market research. We're going to hear a little bit more about that data, and we're going to hear about partnerships that include kind of that ecosystem, the educator, the local community-based organization, and then also the local government, and just really connecting those dots to make sure that we don't have just one piece of that puzzle. So you've got research on the line as well. So we're excited about the next panel. But before we jump to that, I want to ask our two current panelists, Deb and Kevin, any parting thoughts for this group? We'll take them very quickly before we transition.
Yeah, I would just say it's about being intentional. It's about being intentional, evaluating your system. Don't just throw it away. Find out what parts work, keep those parts and enhance it. And also, some of the keys is your community-based organizations. And it's really important for us to help build capacity for those community-based organizations. Because if we can build them up, they're one of our greatest assets in working with diverse populations.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I just like to say, create your own opportunities. I think a lot of times people are looking for an off-the-shelf answer and they think, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, or apprenticeship is only this, or mentor is only that. And I think what's really important here is that when you look concretely at what it is that your agency is doing and understand the issues it's trying to face, what you may come up with, like we work with transit all over the country as well as in California. And while there's common issues, there's many different ways to get to the answer. So I know it's tempting to want to say, here's how we solve the issue of conversion to zero emission buses, right? We would all love that, but actually it's difficult. And Mike Hirsch, who you saw in the video, his first answer will be all answers are local. And that's how he looks at it from his agency, from his transit district. And if you talk to other transit districts, they're going to say that they serve different people, they have different demographics. And while the issues are the same, the solutions, while they have commonalities, give yourself a chance to figure out what you'd like to do and really talk to your peers and get out there and see what's available and what's possible. And we invite everybody to California Transit Works to come listen if you'd like. We're having our annual meeting February 28th, March 1st and 2nd. I'll just do a pitch there if you want to check that out. But I think this is where us building a community becomes so important. We're not silos. So while you have individual approaches, the community can really help support each other and learn from each other that way. And I think that's something that we really strive to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Deb. A key takeaway there, it's so funny, but when we even have the title of this panel, we're talking about recruiting and retaining diverse talent. What you need to recruit or retain the diversity in your community is going to be different based on what your community looks like, what your community is. And so knowing that and understanding that, and then really developing strategies for that is key. So I'm so grateful to Kevin and Deb for your incredible insights, the representation you've given about your programs and that snapshot that we've got. More info to come on their amazing programs. We are, like I said, big fans of both, and we'll be sharing additional resources about them, opportunities for all of them, and additional ways to create potentially even stackable programs, right? So as we're looking at groups like, there was a question about how can we ensure that those programs that require more higher technical skills, there's stackable programs around our community colleges, and then potentially stacking additional certificates and training to get people into the baccalaureate level and then into the master's level and beyond, to really support that lifelong learning and to support the real skills needed and the qualifications needed, the certifications needed, the degrees needed to really do the work in the public sector in certain key areas where maybe you need more than just that entry-level role. So we're exploring all of those things. There is more to come on that. And huge thanks to our panelists, Deb, Kevin, for your time and your insight.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Well, I'm very excited to keep it moving and move into our next panel very quickly. We'll have something about our higher education and workforce development opportunities with a fantastic partner of ILG moderating it, Jeff Marizik, who's going to join the line and moderate this panel and give you all a download on how this can work in your local agencies, really bringing it full circle from the conversation we had at the beginning of our summit with our Vice Chancellor of the California Community College Chancellor's Office. He referenced a few things, and this is a great way to connect some of those dots. Jeff, it is all yours.
Thank you so much, Erica. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Partnering with Higher Education for the Workforce Development. This is the panel for the IDEA Summit, where we're going to talk about how higher education plays an important role. So yes, a great segue from what we heard from the community colleges. I'm Dr. Jeff Marizik, and I'll be your moderator for this session. And I'm a workforce consultant partner of ILG and a founding leadership member of the Innovative Pathways of Public Service, a collective impact collaborative supporting public sector pathways to state and local public careers in the 6-county region of Greater Sacramento. Today, we're fortunate to have 3 distinguished speakers who will share their insights on the crucial intersection of higher education and workforce development in the public sector. Let me quickly introduce our panelists. First up is Dr. Amy Scholes. She's the Executive Dean of Workforce and Strategic Initiatives at Sierra College. Amy previously served as the Dean of Career Continuing and Technical Education, and through meaningful partnerships with employers, industry leaders, community organizations, and educational institutions, she led development of training to access regional workforce gaps, enable learners to gain the skills and connections to thrive in high demand and high wage fields. Next up is Wayne Wiley. He is the Economic Development Manager at the City of Roseville. And Wayne has been with the city for over 19 years, started his career in the planning department before joining the economic development department. He has been instrumental in developing and implementing economic development initiatives and ensuring business enrichment in the region. Wayne also serves on the board of the Downtown Roseville Partnership Business Improvement District and is the co-founder of the Roseville Venture Lab Entrepreneurship Center, which we also know is a partner to Sierra College. Last but not least, Ebony Joy Benzing. She is the co-director of the North Far North Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research. Ebony is also the author of the Bridging the Gap Strategies for Restoring Public Sector Employment in the Sacramento Region report, developed in collaboration with the Institute for Local Government, which analyzes the key trends in public sector employment with a particular focus on local government. Each of our speakers will have about 5 to 7 minutes to present their perspectives on these important topics, and then we'll open the floor for about a 10-minute question and answer session, where you, our audience, can submit your questions also via the chat. Our discussion today will explore various aspects of partnership, including collaborations between higher education institutions and city and economic development offices, ensuring equity in economic development initiatives, ensuring labor market research to inform educational programs and city revitalization efforts, aligning community colleges with local government needs, and overcoming challenges in maintaining long-term workforce partnerships. So without any further ado, let's begin with our first speaker. Amy, could you please share your thoughts on how higher education institutions and city economic development offices can collaborate to address local public sector workforce needs?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. This is exciting for me because I work closely with both the panelists, and so this is like very genuine, like how we work together. So specifically around economic development, it is interesting both with the City of Roseville and County of Placer. I work closely with economic development for both, their external needs and internal needs. So economic development, you might think like, well, that is really more external, but they're really on the front lines in hearing what employers or prospective employers need, and it's usually around workforce. So they're hearing firsthand like what those workforce needs are, which starts the conversation. So what are we doing at Sierra College? How can we support employer needs to support local and regional economic development? And then through that, they also have their own internal workforce needs. So while they're focused on generally public or private economic and workforce development needs, a lot of those align with the public sector needs as well. So we have found that in areas such as IT, and I have an example around IT, and utilities and energy, which actually those skills intersect with manufacturing in many ways. So where those programs, there's a lot of alignment. And also business and accounting. Accounting is a big one right now where there's a big need. So there's a need in the private sector as well as the public sector. So economic development officials or practitioners have been, great partners in our work. I wanted to share an example of how this is working. And City of Roseville is a wonderful partner. They have been at the forefront of economic development and workforce development for the city, and then as a result, the region. So they made an investment a couple of years ago where they sponsored the talent pipeline management work that is happening through the Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce. And with that, not only did they make the investment as a city, but they sent city employees to come through it. So to go through the academy training. So Wayne Wiley, our fellow panelist, he was in there. We were both in the academy, the TPM Academy together. And then we also had a IT professional from the city in that academy. And I actually happened to be on the same work group as him. So through that work, the city is signaling the importance of workforce development and alignment to what the region's needs are, which also happens to intersect with the city's needs, and an investment in that, not only in money, but in time. And then through that work, learning like what the needs were. So we did find some patterns specifically in the IT collaborative of where we're seeing gaps in IT, which we are seeing across the board. And it's interesting, IT is a little bit different in the greater Sacramento region because we don't necessarily have like big tech hubs. We have some tech companies, but every organization requires IT support. And so like really trying to narrow in on what those needs are and then how we can address that collectively and at a regional level. So we had started this work, and then back in the spring, I got an email from the City of Roseville Chief Technology Officer saying, hey, there's this Department of Commerce grant for cybersecurity workforce alignment. And then at the same time, separate email, they didn't talk to each other. The Director of Economic Development sent the same grant like a few hours later. And so because we were really synced up, Sierra College, they understood like our work at Sierra College, what we're doing in IT and cybersecurity, and our commitment to workforce development. The city saw a need to meet their internal public sector needs, but also have a regional workforce around IT to support organizations that are here and want to expand or want to come to the region. So I'm happy to report that we applied for that grant, or Sierra College Foundation applied for that grant, and we were awarded the grant. So we will be working together, yay, on our regional cybersecurity workforce needs. And our initial, I think we're getting into a little bit around the inclusive workforce. So a couple of ways we're doing that is inviting our high school partners in to be able to expand our IT dual enrollment offerings so that students can get into this pipeline earlier in the process. And then also working, another initiative that the city is involved in, and as a Sierra College, is the Invest Health Roseville project that's looking at data related to social determinants of health in core neighborhoods. And so we can do some targeted outreach in areas that have higher unemployment rates and lower incomes that, to get people into the IT pipeline, which as we know has high incomes, high demand. So that's just an example of how we have worked with our economic development partners. So we really enjoy the partnership, and the external focus also aligns with the internal needs in the public sector as well.
Thank you, Amy. Wow, you really are doing the work, right? I mean, you have the relationships, and you're using regional data to really drive the conversation, which I think also connects to Ebony's voice when she starts to speak about how we use data to identify those gaps. So thank you so much for your insightful comments and the amazing work, and congratulations on the new grant that you were awarded for cybersecurity. That's awesome. Now let's turn to Wayne. Wayne, could you discuss how we can ensure that economic development Initiatives in the public sector are equitably designed to reach and benefit underserved communities while also meeting the economic growth objective of our cities?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I want to start off by saying, me and Amy are so closely aligned. She took a few items that I was going to speak to, so I appreciate that. It is a wonderful partnership. I think it would be remiss if I didn't kind of reiterate the benefit of TPM and the Invest Health initiative. Those are all great examples. And the other piece that I wasn't necessarily going to speak to, but Amy kind of brought it up. For us, economic development, we look at it through a variety of perspectives, right? And so one, we're a major employer in our community. And so we look at it through that lens in the sense that we're a full service city. So IT, our environmental utilities, Roseville Electric, public safety, those are all career opportunities for our residents that we are very intentional in trying to recruit a diverse pool of employees that is reflective of our community. And so I think internally we do look at things in that way. But more externally focused, I think it really comes down to kind of the 3 Ps, right? And I love alliteration. It's easier to remember things this way. You have policy, partnerships, and programs, right? And so I think for us, starting off with policy, kind of data driven, looking at, regional, local, kind of data trends, and then looking at our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities on how we can capitalize with our key industries, kind of occupational clusters, what our labor needs are, talent and workforce development needs. And then based on all of that data, we kind of set goals and objectives that align with our ED initiatives, right? And then from there, we kind of identify the community partners. And this is the piece that I think is going to be reoccurring, particularly throughout this panel, is, partnerships are key. And that really helps us and achieve our desired outcomes. And so education partners, workforce development, industry partners. And I think that's where public agencies like the city of Roseville are really well aligned, because we have such a broad and diverse group of partners that we can leverage and help us achieve our goals. And then we look at programs, right? So we've identified the partners that can help us deliver in our goals and meet our goals. And then what programs, identify relevant programs that are necessary. And a good example of this is Bosch, right? There again, in partnership with Sierra College, we ended up having conversations with Bosch maybe starting about 2 years ago. And everyone, I think, on this panel, and definitely the guests that are viewing this discussion, Bosch is committed to making a $1.5 to $2 billion investment within our region, which is a win not only for our region, not only for our community, really for the state of California. You have a global manufacturer who's looking at investing that much money and resources in California, which is a huge win, right? But this is where the city of Roseville looked at, okay, it aligns with our policy. It's a key industry that we've identified. And now who are the partners we can engage to help kind of meet their needs, workforce development needs, and what are the associated programs, right? And in this case, the broader partnerships that I talked about, the key partners that we're aligned with, we were mindful of linking them with the various chambers throughout the Sacramento region, with veteran groups, with community partners. It just so happened that it aligned with Bosch's mission to really engage a broad group of folks because they wanted a diverse employee base. And so in that sense, there was alignment from the business or the industry that we were working with. But I think the other piece, and not to get too convoluted in me answering this question, but it's important for public sector entities to look at kind of regional and community data to ensure that we're proactively addressing the needs of our community based on trends and expectations. And so one is more almost reactive, right? As an economic developer, people come to us all the time asking for assistance, and that's where we engage with the various partners to help them be successful. But then other times we're proactively looking at, okay, what are the trends that we're seeing and how can our community be best suited? And I think when you talk about an equity standpoint, this is where it's really critical to have those higher education partnerships. And I would actually make that more broadly and just say education partners, right? So, Amy talked about the Invest Health initiative. So, we looked at kind of interesting. The city's unemployment rate hovers around 3 to 4% in the last couple of years. Well, in the 3 core neighborhoods that this Invest Health initiative really identified, unemployment was about 10%, right? And so now we're looking at how can we help those groups with the employment issues that they're facing. And being more proactive, how do you take the data and work with your partners to come up with programs that are going to enable particular groups to be ready for those opportunities? And so I think it's twofold, right? Kind of being prepared when people come to you, but then also taking that proactive approach where your community is best suited for the opportunities that are on the horizon. Because the reality is, look, the city oftentimes isn't going to be the ones who take the lead on the programs, but we're going to be the ones that are well suited to partner with the entities that can enable or to institute the programs that are going to ensure success for the community.
Thanks, Wayne. I mean, wow, that's amazing. I love the 3 Ps, right? Policy, partners, and programs. It's a really easy way to sum it up, but you're doing amazing work. You're partnering with Sierra College and the venture lab that you also set up as part of a partnership with that, as I'm aware. So we really appreciate all of your service as a public servant and bringing economic development to Roseville. I think you hit it on the head when you were kind of mentioning data and the importance of data-driven policymaking, as well as, understanding how we develop these basically supply chains of labor. So I'm going to switch over to Ebony now, and I'm going to ask Ebony, could you explain how labor market research can be used to inform both educational program development and city revitalization efforts to create more effective pathways into public service careers?
Yes, absolutely. And I do have a couple slides to kind of share. So if those could come up too. But in the meantime, let me tell you first a little bit about the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research. We are an organization that's associated with the California Community College System. And our goal is to support the development of career education programs in California community colleges by providing labor market analyses. So some of the work I'm going to speak to today is really centered around that labor market data and how it informs these different efforts that are happening across our regions. So right now on the screen, there are covers of 2 reports. We have the 2019 Sacramento Region Public Sector Workforce Needs Assessment for the Innovative Pathways to Public Service report on the right-hand side. The QR code actually links directly to the summary of that report. And then on the left-hand side is the new 2024 Bridging the Gap Strategies for Restoring Public Sector Employment in the Sacramento Region report. So both of these were done through collaboration between both the Centers of Excellence, my Center of Excellence, and Institute for Local Government, where COE provided the research analysis and ILG provided kind of like the context for setting what's happening in our region within this sector. And the goal of both of these reports is to document and highlight what are those workforce needs within the public sector and in local government. Next slide, please. So I just kind of want to touch on a couple of key points. There's a lot on this slide, and I had a lot to say about it, so I'm just going to highlight a few from each one. So labor market data informs the foundation, like I said, of both the 2019 and 2024 reports, and it offers various insights to higher education institutions and government partners. So some of the points I'm going to touch on for education, from the education point of view, is that robust LMI analysis, I'm sorry, I'm using an acronym, LMI is labor market information, can be used to shape educational program offerings. So first, labor market information helps with identifying those core in-demand skills and occupations. From labor market information, we can identify which industries are growing, what occupations are in high demand, and which skills employers are seeking. Educational institutions can design or modify their programs to teach these in-demand skills and to target those in-demand occupations. And that helps ensure that learners are better positioned for employment once they finish one of the programs. In the 2024 report, there were two large clusters that were identified within local government. These were the largest, they had the largest counts of employment in local government. And these are the business management and administration cluster, which is predominantly jobs related to managing the business of government. And then the law, public safety, corrections, and security cluster, which, if you haven't guessed, it's the primarily public safety jobs. These two clusters are also projected to have the most job growth in our region over the next 5 years. So having programs that are devoted to these particular areas are really essential to ensure that we have the workforce that's needed to fill those gaps. The second point I'd like to make is around workforce partnerships within the educational program offerings bucket. Labor market research often involves collaboration with employers and workforce development boards. Educational institutions can use this information to build partnerships that provide internships, apprenticeships, or on-the-job training, which in turn strengthens the connection between learning and employment. The collaboration between COE and ILG is really a prime example of that. And what's really wonderful about the process that we're going through is that ILG was able to bring in other partners to the table that help shape the direction of the report and craft like a message that is widely open or accessible to many entities. The last point I want to make in this category has to do with shaping career pathways. Labor market research can also inform the development of clear career pathways where programs can be structured to lead to well-defined jobs. For example, the 2024 report highlights specific occupations, such as those that are employed in large numbers within local government or are projected to have a significant amount of growth over the next 5 years, or they have a significant number of workers who are nearing retirement. These occupations in particular represent opportunities to ensure sufficient staffing to be able to carry out government functions. They also represent opportunities for community colleges to shore up their existing programs because we do have a lot of programs in these spaces already that target these occupations to be able to meet those needs. Now, from the viewpoint of city or regional revitalization, labor market information helps us to first understand the economic strengths and challenges of a region. Wayne touched on this earlier. This includes understanding which industries are thriving, which are declining, and which sectors have the potential for growth. The 2024 report provides an in-depth workforce analysis of local government in the Sacramento region and the public sector, so including state and federal government across the region. Analysis of local government employment trends in the report suggests that while employment within the public administration piece of local government has recovered and surpassed pre-pandemic employment levels, it's our public education systems that are really lagging behind in terms of employment recovery. So that's a really big key finding from the report. Labor market can also support revitalization efforts by aligning education and training with job market needs. That's what we're here to do. Labor market research helps identify gaps between the skills that local workers have and what employers need, and agencies can invest in educational training and apprenticeship programs and internships to kind of be able to meet the specific needs. Next slide, please. This will be my last slide. And again, I'm only going to touch on about 3 of these points. So in terms of how the research from these reports can be used to build effective pathways into public service careers, the first one I'd like to highlight is the awareness and early exposure. I think part of the challenges with public service careers has to do with visibility. Increasing awareness of these jobs, especially among younger people, can help attract talent into these roles. And partnerships with local colleges and universities are going to be absolutely essential for this. The second point I'd like to make is create clear pathways. Public service careers need clear and transparent career progression opportunities to attract and retain talent. One strategy to achieve this might be creating structured pathways that lead from either entry-level or temporary positions to full-time roles with clear expectations centered around advancement. And lastly, my personal favorite, because I really value this, is work-life balance and benefits. Public service careers offer benefits that private sector jobs may not, honestly. And these really need to be emphasized and highlighted to individuals to kind of attract them into these roles. The counterpoint to this is that oftentimes I'm hearing that maybe our wages are kind of lagging behind in the public sector, especially compared to the private sector. But I think that by emphasizing those benefit packages, like that include health insurance, retirement plans, loan forgiveness, student with graduate debt here, and job security can really attract talent into the sector. So that's kind of what I got for now.
Thanks, Ebony. Yeah, these types of careers are amazing for upward mobility because once someone does find the front door to a public sector job, there's usually great, clear career ladders inside these types of organizations. And I really like the comment earlier from one of our panelists that spoke about skills forward focus. I think that really is another real big benefit of public sector. The jobs are very well clarified through job descriptions. So it makes it really good for competency-based pathways. Again, thank you all for joining us today and presenting. At this time, I think I'm going to invite Erica Manuel in to lead the question and answer session for this panel. So Erica, if you could join us.
Absolutely. I'll just wait for a spotlight. Fantastic. So this panel has been fantastic, and I loved some of the questions that you already identified. And you shared some interesting kind of connecting tissue around how the ecosystem really can work. Can't tell if I'm frozen or not. Hopefully I'm not. But how the ecosystem can work. And one of the things that I think has come up that I think we actually came up in the very beginning of our session, and is something that I think we really wanted to highlight, was talking a little bit more about this economic development, community development role, and how you're connecting the dots between the city's role in economic development, as an example, Wayne, how you're linking the community colleges to that, and then how you're maybe even linking into the entrepreneurship program that you have, I know, with the lab. I know that it's a small business and entrepreneurial program, but really thinking about potentially minority-owned businesses or others, is there anything you can talk about how you've connected those dots between your role as an economic development engine of the local agency and then connecting that with the community college system as well?
Yeah, sure. There again, a lot of that was data driven. We were seeing, trends. We were seeing the folks that were moving to our community. And one of the things that I say in a lot of my presentations is there's been kind of a paradigm shift in economic development where now employers, their number one concern, sometimes even above the cost of doing business, is making sure they have access to talent, right? And so as it relates to the Roseville Venture Lab and that initiative, it kind of checked off a lot of boxes. One is we saw that there were a lot of folks that were moving to the area that had the wherewithal, maybe the background, and the desire to start their own business. And so we wanted to create this hub or this center, right, that folks could take advantage of. As part of that, there's a workforce development component because the reality is it's very hard to be a successful entrepreneur. But the skills gained in going through the Venture Lab and the different workshops and programs, it's a workforce development component because they can take those skills and they're transferable, right? When they go, if they're not successful, and they go back into the kind of the standard career pathway. And as it relates to Amy and our relationship with Sierra College, there's a number of programs that we've collaborated on. I mean, she talked about TPM, that being one, the Talent Pipeline Management Program, and really kind of being entrenched in the broadness of our community partners, our employers, what their needs are, and then how does that align with the offerings of Sierra College, right? And so there's a couple of examples that I can point to. One would be, I think I mentioned this earlier, Bosch, and then internally for the city, I think we just heard about it. Early career exploration is super critical for local government. There's a lot of jobs that people are unaware of. that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. And so naturally the exposure there, it allows for a lot of people to be able to get into these jobs, but they need to know about it. And, you know, one of the best ways as it relates to equity is onboarding folks, educating folks as early as possible. And so that really can start K through 8, high school, and obviously higher ed. So, you know, those are a couple of ways that we've really been focusing on that. I think the last piece, going back to the Venture Lab, you know, some of the programs that we've really been intentional on implementing have been those that we know cater and appeal to a broad or diverse group of entrepreneurs. And so one is our food entrepreneur program. We had a Roseville Rising, which is typically a 12 to 16 week cohort-based program. And so we've looked at programs focused on nonprofits. We've looked at programs focused on food entrepreneurs because we know that there's a diverse group of folks that typically engage in those types of businesses. And we've been extremely successful. And to that end, one, we've had the highest participation rate in those programs and the most diverse cohorts in those programs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wayne. All right, we have a time for one more question, and I think it's probably going to be directed at Ebony because I think there's something that you said that syncs up really, really nicely with, I think, one of the things that our attendees may be able to take away from this if they're not already engaging with an amazing organization like the COE, the Centers of Excellence. What's the best process or approach for engaging with the COE? I know you've dabbled and touched on it, but if you can dive in, if you're a local agency and you haven't already started working with your COE, what do you recommend? How do we do it? What's the process? How do we connect to this? Because you talk about data and you guys have it. What do we need to do?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thanks for asking. So first, I would like to just encourage everyone to start off by checking out our webpage. It's coeccc.net. That showcases the work from all of the centers of excellence across the state. There are about 8 to 9 regions, and each of our economic regions has a COE attached to it. You can also find the contact information for each of the regional directors on that website. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight is that we typically engage in this work through the colleges specifically. So usually it's kind of like an amalgamation of like a partner coming together with the college and they identify a specific need, and then they reach out to us with their very specific data request. So that would be like one key way to kind of ask us about the work. But then we also do take on projects outside of the colleges. It just kind of depends on everyone's bandwidth, honestly. So if you reach out, you can talk to one of us about what you are needing and we can move forward from there.
Excellent. And thank you so much, Rafa. Just you haven't taken a look at the chat. The link that Ebony just referenced is in the chat. And you can click on that for reference to the COE and how it connects to those regional community colleges. The COEs are kind of resourced as a network in their certain regions. So they're connected to, they're specifically connected. And so definitely connect with those COEs and connect with those colleges to get to the COEs. There is a pathway to it. And if you need any help, ILG would certainly assist you in that. I will just say that this has been a phenomenal panel, phenomenal questions, great insights. And I think this is the end of that panel. And I'm going to transition all of this conversation over to my colleague, Melissa, who is going to walk you through another engagement survey. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Wayne. And thank you, Ebony.
Perfect. Thank you, Erica. But yes, before we jump into our last panel, we're going to go back to our Mentimeter. So if you want to get your cell phones out again, I'll put the instructions back up on the screen for a second here so you can revisit that code if it kicked you out. So I'll give everybody a second to reconnect here. And if you have tech issues again, definitely chat our team and they can help you reconnect if needed. I don't have a softball question for you this time, so I'll let you guys have a minute here to get reconnected. Looks like we've got quite a few folks on, so I'm going to go ahead and launch our first question. But just like last time, the code will stay at the top of the screen if you're still trying to connect. But first up, connected to our last panel's conversation, does your organization need better public sector workforce or labor market research? So I think probably unsurprisingly from the conversations we've had today, there's an overwhelming amount of you that are saying yes, or that you're not sure what data or research your organization already has. So definitely an opportunity to reconnect or connect with the community colleges and the COE, as Ebony was just mentioning, to help get some of that that data and that research. And we'll be publishing the report that Ebony mentioned in the next few weeks. So we'll make sure to share that out with the folks that registered here too, which will provide some data mainly focused on the greater Sacramento region. To keep us moving. So we're also curious if you're currently partnering with a community college to help upskill or reskill your existing staff. This could be through the formalized apprenticeship programs that we've been talking about, or informal partnerships, having folks go to community college classes or things of that nature. Looks like these still are adjusting a bit, but most of you are not currently partnering with your community colleges. So another opportunity to think about that partnership and how that could be used as a tool to, again, either formally or informally help with upskilling existing staff to meet some of the existing needs that we know are there. So as Erica mentioned at the beginning of today's event, this summit is just one part of a larger workforce development initiative that ILG is undertaking to increase pathways into the public sector. So how should we follow up? Are there other types of programs or training or convenings that might be helpful to you all as you work through these challenges? In-person events, other webinars, what would be helpful to you all? Providing a list of resources, yes, so we can definitely share the resources that were mentioned here and the links and make sure that all of those are available to you all. In-person events. Thinking about engaging at the high school level. So yes, youth apprenticeships and youth programming came up. Definitely you heard that from Kevin at the City of Sacramento. Direct links, we will definitely do that. Breakout sessions to have more in-depth conversations. That's definitely something we can think about. Action plans. Leadership training examples, yes, that would be great. Youth apprenticeships and apprenticeships. Shorter topic-specific workshops and webinars, definitely something we can think about. So it sounds like deeper dives, in-person events, breakout conversations, so more networking opportunities perhaps for you all to connect with each other. Thinking about youth, resources for youth, and K-12. And then sharing resources from this session, which we will definitely do. Thinking about information from other states, yes. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? So what else can we pull from? Perfect, appreciate all of these thoughts. So what additional workforce development resources do you all need? So to move some of these initiatives forward in your agencies, what's missing? What do you need from us as ILG, from your peers, from the state? Relationships and buy-in from labor unions, yes. Suggestions on where to post job opportunities to recruit a more diverse workforce. Definitely direction on how to foster growth in existing workforce, make them excited about it. So going back to that upskilling, definitely. Training on applying DEI. Compliance on successful apprenticeships, perfect. And Erica, I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to talk about some of this at the close, but again, going back to the fact that this is one piece of a larger puzzle for ILG, we will be putting out additional resources, resource hubs where we'll share examples of creative job posting or job advertisements, of job descriptions, of a number of different data points to help with some of this peer learning and information sharing. The data report that Ebony mentioned, we will be having some how-tos on this apprenticeship front and some of the basics on what you need to know there. So there's definitely a lot more to come from us over the next few months. So other resources flagged, data, stakeholder connections, partnering with state and local government agencies, collaborative opportunities, definitely. One final question for you all. So a lot of you mentioned more in-depth webinars or in-person events or breakout peer learning sessions. So what topics are you interested in? So if we were going to do additional webinars or conversations and convenings, what are those topics that we should be thinking about that are really top of mind for you all? I think some of them just came up in the last slide in terms of DEI and I saw leadership training, but what else? Overcoming systemic barriers. What elements are critical for retention of employees? Directly targeting underserved areas, HRDEI. Tools to empower all levels of staff to get involved. That's great. Social emotional learning. What retention benefits are working? So again, going back to not reinventing the wheel, what's working in other agencies? How can we help share that information? Perfect. Okay. How to address the DEI backlash. Career advancement up the career ladder, lots of DEI. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, I'm going to toggle back to our slide deck so that we can get to our final session of the day here. But we will share contact information at the end. So if you have additional ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out to us as we do follow up from today's session. So to wrap up the event, we are honored to have Aaron Avery, Director of State Legislative Affairs at the California Special Districts Association, joining us to provide critical updates on the legislative landscape affecting public agencies, particularly in the areas of workforce and labor policy. Aaron will cover key legislation from the past 2 years, discuss the state budget challenges shaping legislative priorities, and offer insights on upcoming trends in workforce development. CSDA is one of ILG's 3 main affiliates and a huge supporter of the public sector workforce. As you know, our affiliates focus on advocacy, and so much of what happens at the state and federal policy level can impact how we operate in our agencies on the ground. While Aaron works for CSDA, his report will cover policy and legislative issues that will impact most local governments on the line. Aaron, thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, ILG, for the invitation today. As Melissa mentioned, my name is Aaron Avery. I'm Director of State Legislative Affairs at the California Special Districts Association. If you don't know what a special district is, I'd be happy to share that we are one of the main forms of local government in the state of California, along with cities and counties. There are over 3,000 special districts in the state, and my association represents about 1,000 of them, a little bit more than that, providing select services and specified services as small as a small cemetery district, public cemetery district, or library district, to as large as a very large water district or energy utility. So our folks employ tens of thousands of public sector employees in the state. And the issues covered in the summit today are really important to our folks, as well as some of the legislation I'm going to cover. So I've been asked to provide really just a very high level overview of the state legislative session and just give some perspectives on what were some of the hot topics this year in the labor and employment space. The legislative session ended on August 31st of this year. That was the conclusion of the 2-year 23 and 24 legislative session. The governor had until the 30th of September to sign or veto bills. And really one of the major driving factors this year in legislation was the state budget. And you may have read in the news, or maybe you're involved in legislation and you're already aware that the state really was grappling with a pretty deep budget hole at the beginning of the year. In January, the budget deficit was projected to be about $38 billion. And in the May revise, another $7 billion was added to that tab. Through a variety of means that was balanced throughout the course of the year. But some of those budget cuts or fund transfers were pretty painful. And really the budget woes constrained some of the more ambitious legislative proposals that we saw this year. So just give you some quick bill statistics. So we just ended the 23-24 legislative session, and there were 5,562 measures, if you can believe it, introduced in that 2-year period. And I'll give you some signature and veto statistics. So for 2024 only, 1,206 bills made it to the governor's desk of more than 2,000 or so that were introduced during the year. The governor vetoed 189 of those bills. He signed 1,017 of those bills, representing about an 84% signature rate and a 16% veto rate. I was looking at some statistics online, and about 30% of the veto messages that the governor issued for those 189 bills, budget impacts was cited as one of the reasons for the veto. So really the budget constraints this year were driving a lot of the conversation. In terms of labor and employment, really there were 3 major bills that took up basically all the oxygen for public employers this year. But I'll just take a step back from that and talk about the April 17th 2024 informational hearing by the Assembly Public Employment and Retirement Committee. And this is actually available online. All of the budget committee or all the committee hearings have archived media, archived video that you can access on the internet. So you can go back and watch this hearing. It's 3 or 4 hours long. But the title, just to give you a sense of sort of the themes of the year of this informational hearing, was Public Service Delivery and Workforce Wellbeing, Addressing the Vacancy Crisis in Local Government. And really those 2 key issues of vacancy rates and workforce well-being were the driving factors around a couple of the bills that I'll touch on for you. So the 3 major bills that really were of most significance to the local government community were Assembly Bill 2557 by Assemblymember Ortega, Assembly Bill 2489 by Assemblymember Chris Ward from the San Diego area, and Assembly Bill 2561 by Assemblymember Tina McKinner from the Los Angeles area, and Assemblymember McKinnon is also the chair of the Public Employment and Retirement Committee in the Assembly. Those bills, just to recap them very quickly, Assembly Bill 2557 went through a number of iterations, but it was really aimed at local agencies' ability to contract out for special services, and the code defines special services fairly broadly. It could be anything from administrative services to architectural services. And this bill would have put some constraints around that. Ultimately, the final version of the bill would have required a notice to a public employee union prior to contracting out if those types of services had been performed in-house. It would have required a website a website posting of all the contract and contractual information associated with the specific contract, which kind of would have functioned essentially as like a self-PRA for a local government agency. And finally, it would have required specific reporting requirements put on the contractor included in the terms of the contract that the local agency was signing with that contractor. And to the point about, budget constraints, this is a bill that was held and did not advance out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So in the second house, which is the committee that's tasked with reviewing bills that have a major fiscal impact for the state. The second bill, Assembly Bill 2489, aimed really again at contracting and the ability of local agencies to contract out, affecting many of the same code sections as 2557. But this bill would have required local agency contractors to have the same minimum qualifications as in-house unionized employees, again, if they are performing similar services. That bill, again, to this budget conversation, was held in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, so it actually did not get out of the first house. It was held on the suspense file. It did not advance throughout the year. The last bill, AB 2561, by Chair McKinnon, that bill actually was chaptered. It was signed by the governor, and it will go into effect on January 1st of 2025. And that bill, the final version that was enacted, requires every local agency in the state, so this is cities, counties, special districts, to once a year hold a public hearing at which vacancy rates and recruitment efforts are discussed. The bill requires a spot at the table essentially to make a presentation for a recognized employee organization. And if a local agency happens to have a high vacancy rate, which is defined as 20% or more in a bargaining unit, there's additional information that needs to be made available by the local agency. And so that bill applies regardless of agency size. The public hearing requirement applies regardless of whether or not the local agency has a unionized workforce. And it also applies regardless of whether or not a local agency has a high vacancy rate or not. So those were the three main bills that really took up a lot of the energy in the labor and employment space for local governments this year. I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, my organization, CSDA, and many others in the local government employer community, we were opposed to those three bills, mostly because of cost and real operational challenges in terms of implementation, particularly for the first two bills. However, as I mentioned, the last bill, Assembly Bill 2561, was signed by the governor, and it will be going into effect on January 1st of next year. To sort of the second topic of that informational hearing that occurred in the Assembly this year, and that's workforce well-being. I just wanted to flag one bill that I think is sort of illustrative of that, and it actually gained quite a few headlines this year, so you may have read about it, and that's AB 2751 by Assemblymember Haney out of San Francisco. And this bill was known colloquially as the Right to Disconnect bill, and would have required every employer in the state, so that's private and public sector employers, to establish a workplace policy with some very narrow exceptions that would allow public employees, exempt and non-exempt, to opt out of receiving or disconnect from receiving after-hours communications. So that was really kind of pitched as getting at an employee well-being issue that was important to the Assembly member. That bill did not advance out of the Assembly. It was held again on the Assembly Appropriations Committee suspense file, which is again the fiscal committee for the California State Assembly, and did not advance for the year. One other bill that I just want to touch on that I think really fits in nicely with some of the DEI issues that are being discussed today is Senate Bill 1137 by Senator Smallwood-Cuevas. And this bill makes a number of changes to various civil rights laws in the state. But importantly for this group, it makes a change to the Fair Employment and Housing Act, known as FEHA. And what it changed essentially was it takes the whole list of protected characteristics ranging from race, gender, sexual orientation that many folks are familiar with, and it adds something to that and says discrimination based on any of these characteristics is unlawful in employment and housing, but it is also unlawful to discriminate based on any combination of these characteristics. So really kind of bolstering the protections there for employees, folks in the housing space. So an important bill that moved through the process this year. In terms of just looking ahead to next year, I do think that the budget constraints are going to continue to be a major problem for the state. And I think that they will drive a lot of the conversation as they did this year in terms of these ambitious goals that the legislature might have, and are they actually affordable? So look for that to be a continuing theme. However, there is a little bit of blue sky, I guess you could say, coming through the clouds. You may have seen some headlines recently indicating that budget receipts are actually doing a little bit better recently than had been anticipated. So it's possible that the budget constraints may diminish a bit going into next year and the year after. But I do think it will continue to be a predominant factor in the legislature. I do think if there is another opportunity for an informational hearing, either again in the Assembly Public Employment and Retirement Committee or in the Senate or really in any committee that has relevant jurisdiction here, the types of sort of non-traditional apprenticeship programs that ILG is spearheading, really may be good examples to bring to the table if we're given the opportunity as an employer community. With that, I'll wrap up my comments. I know that I'm the final speaker today and the last person standing between everyone and the end of their day. So I will wrap up quickly. And if we have a few minutes, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Let's see if there are any questions. I'm not seeing any. So I think we're okay in the question department. But I can say thank you so much for that insight. It's so funny because ILG doesn't live in the world of advocacy. We definitely deal in the implementation space. And what I love about your legislative update is that it really did give us this like, hey, this is coming and we're going to have to implement all of these on the ground. And some of our practitioners on the phone or on the line are absolutely able to see that connection and the connective tissue, right, between your work and what's going to come, and how there are some policies that are addressing some of the very topics that we've been discussing. Makes our job a little bit easier, sometimes a little bit harder. Regardless, it's helpful to be informed, and we do appreciate especially your broad insight on all the things that we should keep an eye on, and certainly we'll be coming to you for more guidance. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica. Appreciate your time.
Excellent. Well, we're going to dive into our wrap up. And so I'm so excited to end this summit, which has been a whirlwind, but it has been a deep 4 hours. And I am so proud of you. I just wanted you to know from statistics wise, we had a lot of people registered. You guys have been popping off and on. And I'm so excited that you have held on to the very end or just joined us. That's great too. We have loved having you in this summit, and we just have a couple closing remarks for you before we send you on your way. As we kind of approach the end of this summit, I just wanted to reflect on some of the key insights that we've gained today. I think that we have heard some really powerful discussions on how to build more inclusive, more diverse, and more accessible public sector workforces. And I think we got some inspiration from our panelists. We got insight from our panelists. We got ideas from our panelists. We talked about innovative apprenticeship models. We talked about strategies for overcoming some systemic barriers. We talked about challenges. We talked about opportunities. And I think there's been a few themes that have really resonated throughout the day. And I think Aaron touched on some of them as well. the importance of collaboration, whether it's with community colleges, labor organizations, or local government partners. We've got to figure out how to work with our partners in this space, and even ones we haven't touched yet, in creating pathways to public sector careers. And we didn't have community-based organizations on this summit today. That does not mean they're not at this table. I think in future conversations, we'll make sure to integrate our community-based partners into this. As you could tell, it was a very tight agenda, but know that a core tenet of ILGs is certainly that voice, and making sure that the community is embedded in the strategy that we build, that is collaborative, and that it's cohesive, and that it's responsive, and based on the needs. And so that collaboration that includes a community voice and a worker voice, an employee voice, is really, really important. We also have to talk a lot about the intentional, equity-driven action that we need to dismantle some of the barriers that are preventing our underrepresented communities from accessing and thriving in these public sector roles. We started to have some tough conversations today. I think we're going to continue to have more tough conversations, really highlighting, I think, to that systems change panel, that conversation about highlighting the many assets that are available in our communities and in our workers over those deficits that we often focus on, too often, right? That we focus on in language and in other ways. We need to remove that scarcity mindset and empower those that we hope to serve and work with. And really, there was also a theme of an emphasis on innovation, whether you're talking about programs that are tried and true, like apprenticeships, and really modeling and revising those for the non-traditional sectors, or if there's ways that we can really take the phrase innovation and apply it to workforce and HR. Even though you don't think it maybe belongs there, it's not easy, but it is doable. And I think that message that we can be the change that we want to see, and that we can do it in recruitment, we can do it in hiring, we can do it in retention, and also in building systems that can adapt to meet the evolving needs of our communities, and that we can embrace even new technologies like AI and data and research to plan ahead for that workforce of the future. So looking ahead, as we return to our organizations, I really do want to encourage us all to think about how we can take what we've learned today and apply it to create lasting change. And hopefully you'll work with us and share with us what you need to do that, because we are going to be bringing more to this work and bringing more opportunities for us to collaborate. Because I think building a truly representative and equitable public workforce really requires continuous effort and collaboration. So on the next slide, I'm going to encourage you to join our network of local government leaders and others in this ecosystem. I invite you to stay connected with ILG, whether by joining our newsletter list, joining our new public sector workforce community of practice that we're going to announce soon, becoming an apprenticeship pilot partner, or joining us at future events and convenings, or just following us on social media. We hope that you will. This slide shows you our handles and how to connect with ILG. The next slide is just a reminder that a recording for this summit will be available very soon. We'll send it to all of our registrants, make sure it's on our website, as well as some of the resources that were referenced in today's summit. We want to make sure you have contact information. We want to make sure you have links to reports. We want to make sure you have videos. Anything that we talked about, we'll try and include it. And if we miss something, just shoot us a note. We'll try and get that back to you. Next slide. Before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you, and just extend that heartfelt thanks to the funders and to the partners and the sponsors who made this summit possible. Your support is just so instrumental in advancing the work that we do to promote equity, diversity, access in the public sector careers. That whole mantra of IDEA is really core to what ILG does and what we really want to bring to this public sector, and elevating what you're already doing. Thank you so much for continuing to invest in these critical conversations and in these actions. We really do remain grateful to you. And we're certainly grateful for our affiliates like CSDA, like Cal Cities, and like CSAC. Next slide. We're going to be sort of closing down soon, but I would be remiss if I did not thank the incredible team at ILG, including our consultants who helped bring this summit to life. Raphael, Melissa, Paul, Jeff, thank you so much. And then this group behind the scenes that you didn't see during the summit. That includes Carly Brown, Roberto Carlos Torres, Hannah Stelmakovich, Nikita Sinha, Christy Bivens, Haley Oswar Zelaya. Thank you all so much for everything you've done before and after and behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, to all of our speakers, our panelists, our participants, Thank you for hanging out with us. You and hundreds of you came and went throughout this 4 hours. You contributed so much today, and we're so excited for the work to come. I hope that you are leaving with some new ideas, some new strategies, some new connections that are going to help you move this important work forward. Just thank you. Thank you again for your time, for your dedication to improving that idea concept, really moving that forward in the public sector. Let's try and keep that momentum going and continue building a workforce that really represents and serves our community. So on behalf of the Institute for Local Government and our partners at the Innovative Pathways to Public Service, thank you so much for joining this Idea Summit. Have a great rest of your week.